Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Forced to Lead the Villains by Nezu? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. What did you just say to me? Nezu kept both of his paws on his teacup as a casual smirk pulled across his muzzle. Don't try to be coy with me, young Midoriya. You know exactly what I just stated. Not wanting to fall for whatever game Nezu was playing, Izuku chose to stay silent. He was already upset that the principal had once again pulled him into his office for some sort of discussion, more so a runaround, which always ended up being a rough, dumb ploy for the a-hole to get something. Sure, Izuku knew what that something was, but the feeling of this meeting seemed different than the usual ones he was forced into. Though that could also just be because the BSTRD had been speaking in a dissimilar tone of voice than the one the mammal normally uses. He generally hid his condescending tone with a mixture of faux excitement. And yet instead, it now just hinted that the rat most likely thinks of himself as a winner against a stubborn quirkless kid, as if he actually has something that is making the chimera unusually giddy. I have simply stated that I have won our little game, young Midoriya, and I am very excited about the possible futures of you and I. Anyone else who were to see the shift to the now gleeful grin of Principal Nezu would simply cower in fear. Izuku, however, was not just any person and decided glaring right back at him, showing some sort of a small act of defiance, was the correct form of action to take. He had been playing this game, of which only Nezu likes to call it as so, for a little over a year and a half, and from Izuku's point of view nothing had changed. Hell, he didn't even think it was something that he needed to put all of his focus into other than the times when he is stuck with the mammal in the first place. Like here and now. So with a raise of an eyebrow, arms placated over his chest, refusing to even drink the tea that had been placed in front of him, the boy scowled. This had to be another test, a stupid addition to the Chimera's game. I have no idea what that could even mean. His dusty green eyes glowered at the rat in front of him. From where I stand, you still have nothing on me that could have finished what you call a game. Surely you have nothing that can make our standings with each other shift in any meaningful way. I do admit that this took quite longer than I had expected given exactly who I am, but you, young Midoriya, are extremely proficient in hiding your tracks. In fact, you being able to hide them at all, from me, is what makes you oh so impressive. Izuku had to stop himself from scoffing openly. Surely you must understand that the more you tried to hide from me the harder I would look. Especially given the fact that no one has ever had the gall to tell me no with something I so diligently want. Izuku still didn't break his eye contact with the rat due to the entire principle of the topic and his obvious spite. If he refused to look away, what would that simple glare mean to the other? What hints would his demeanor show when he wasn't so focused on the rage building in his gut? He didn't want to become the principal's new pet, his student, as Nezu insists that is what he wants, despite Izuku knowing that there has to be more to it, and has said no multiple times since his start at Yui. Sure, it was actually a month into his first year, but considering the annoyance he has had to deal with, after the fact, was too frustrating to care about the actual timeline of things. Honestly, despite Izuku trying to stay low-key to not bring any attention to himself, for obvious reasons as well as more private, he shouldn't have been surprised that some teacher in the DMN Hero School would have kept their eyes on him. He was the first quirkless to enter it, after all. He just never thought the principal would have found him interesting enough to look into very hard, especially since he did his best to hide his own intelligence during the entrance exam. And yet, ever since Nezu set his little black beady eyes on Izuku, he hardly found any rest while actually going to school. He had made it perfectly clear, multiple times by now, that he was fine staying in general education. To Izuku, it didn't matter how much the rat knew how he fibbed his scores just enough to stay under the radar, or how many weeks into the school year it actually took for the rat to figure that one even out. The hero couldn't do a DMN thing about it. In fact, there was no way to know and show, without reasonable doubt, that that was what Izuku had been doing in the first place since starting his high school education. It was only because of Nezu's quirk that he was able to notice anything weird or different with his scores at all, but with Izuku's own master poker face the rat couldn't rightfully do anything about it. Especially since it wasn't as if he always scored the same amount on any test or homework assignment, or that he would be dumb enough to use the same calculative method every time to make sure everything went fine. It was an extra precaution so his work wouldn't key in any teacher that Izuku did choose out certain questions to purposefully make incorrect answers. The fact that he was a phenomenal actor, after many years of wearing a mask, helped a lot with those first few confrontations with the mammal. Not that the different methods he used to obscure his true emotions and reactions was able to stay forever. At least not in front of Nezu himself. When the mammal finally decoded one of his notebooks, halfway into the school year, Izuku knew that hiding his true expressions and thoughts were meaningless. Supposedly the fact that the code was even hard to crack for the principal just spurred on his interest even more. Honestly, Izuku didn't know if he should have been grateful or frustrated that one of his codes could have been figured out at all. But considering the notebook he had been pulling information out of was older than the ones he had been making since he was 10 to help Hitoshi train for the sports festival, by referencing a cryptic under from many years back to help the boy with his quirk, did make him feel somewhat okay with him figuring it out. It would have hurt his pride if the BSTRD had been able to break his constantly changing newer code, even if Nezu would then know just how impressive his analysis actually could be. So a year and a half later, so close to summer vacation, Izuku tried to keep on his now infamous poker face to try and hide any vague anger that may escape it. Though, it wasn't as if said mask was far away from his actual current demeanor. Why can't he just accept a no? What do you think I have found, young Midoriya? Izuku's eyebrow twitched just slightly at the tone. Again, why do you think I'm so confident that this game has finally come to its conclusion? I refuse to play with you this time, Nezu. If you have something to say, then just say it, because I for one know that every leading question you ever have is a test, and I refuse to be tested like a lab rat waiting for experimentation. And if that sentence didn't spark some slight sadistic joy to the quirkless boy's heart, seeing Nezu's smile now falter along with a twitch of his ear, he didn't know what would. I see. The principal's eyes squinted for a split second before his ravishing smile returned. Izuku just hoped that the slight terror that sparked in his gut didn't show on his face the moment the chimera put his teacup down. Smile, yes, he could handle that no problem. It meant that the mammal was extremely confident and used that grin to strike fear in others with an all-knowing attitude of, I know everything and so therefore you should fear me as I can ruin you. But when the mammal puts down his tea, it was a short and small tell that he isn't playing anymore. And as someone who always knew the rat was playing a game that, honest to God, was terrifying. Something Izuku never thought he would feel with the manipulative BSRD, since he swore he only held contempt when thinking about the chimera. This meant that Nezu had something, genuinely had something. And Izuku could only hope it wasn't the one thing that he had been so good at hiding his tracks of. So FANG proficient even when being forced to stay in the dorms that were implemented the year prior. If Nezu found OU, Null, there was the end of his future as he knew it. A calm, simple future where he just ghosted through general education without much change to his everyday life, hiding under the radar. Sure, it was more than the average kid actually did outside of school. Not every teen chooses to be an informant and vigilante after all, but it was his life nonetheless. It was the life he chose, what he did and when, where he was free and no one called him useless or a pain or disgusting and worthless. He was Null, the analytical informant conveniently turned vigilante when he had to learn to fight for himself against criminals and villains alike. Specifically when they didn't like how much Null helped the heroes in society with his information. Especially when they didn't like how the information he gave criminals always seemed to be lacking in comparison. But the underground had come to realize that no matter how morally gray the vigilante tended to ride, the line just barely crossed. Izuku had a set of rules and codes he followed. And while he was able to help villains with their quirks for money, for him to live, he would never give them anything that could endanger others. That isn't to say teaching someone how to use their quirk, especially if it hurts them, couldn't end up putting others in danger, especially if they did end up doing something morally unjust with the information that they learned about themselves. Information was just another thing he was good at finding, and so if people were to pay him for something that would be considered legal, as anyone could theoretically find the information themselves if they were smart enough to do so, Then that was just the other aspect of Null's generosity when in traveling through the shadows as Null. So it wasn't that much of a surprise that many did say, especially some very proud heroes, that he was just a villain in a different costume no matter how many he saved, villain or civilian alike. Honestly, he did find that sentiment very stupid though. 'Cause he couldn't be a villain. He had no quirk. Lawfully, a villain is someone who uses a quirk to inflict harm on others or use them for illegal activities. And as Null never used a quirk, as he didn't have one, he was simply labeled a criminal. Well, Izuku named himself a criminal seeing as how he had never been caught, and so the police just assumed he had a quirk. Legally, he wasn't a villain or a vigilante because of that fact, but criminal was definitely a correct term to use. It wasn't like he was that innocent. He had to forge documents for himself many times for different reasons, as well as maybe hack into places he wasn't meant to be for either information for himself or to help the people in his life be safe. Though in any case he could just state that they should be happy that he found a backdoor in their security, because if a villain did so, it could have turned out real bad. And if he ever used one of the favors he has asked his customers for before. What did you say, Nezu? Izuku pet his head to the side to feign innocence. As if that would be enough to hide the facial expressions he had unfortunately let Nezu see for just a split second. He knew it wouldn't work. You know, I have been interested in the vigilante that young Shoyuta has been so diligently connected to for the last few years. There were many reasons I wanted to find out who they were before that man, who thinks of Null as a son. Izuku swallowed on nothing as Nezu continued, but this revelation of mine has been quite interesting if not satisfying. Izuku knew that his eyes had widened the tiniest bit midway through the rat statement, him knowing that Nezu had been clearly mocking Izuku rather than Eraser himself, but he definitely didn't do so willingly. Sure, Izuku joked about Eraserhead being his dad, part of his heart loving the idea of actually having him as his father rather than his true one, but he didn't expect Eraser to be serious when the man teased him back. If it even was a tease on Izuku's side at all. Though this could just be another test, another way that Nezu was FING with him. The Chimera, despite not having any true gauge of proper human emotions himself, could have figured out how his heart soared at the idea of living with Eraser and actually having a family. Of course it was a test. It had to be one to calculate his own reaction. Eraser wouldn't actually think of Izuku as his own kid. What does that have to do with me, Nezu? Sure, I know of the vigilante, as he's infamous for not getting caught, but what does Null have to do with me and you trying to wring my neck to become your student? You know, Nezu's paws tapped away at his computer for a split second. Aizawa never asked me to look into his current problem child, as he feared I would scare them away. Though I do highly suspect it was because he wanted to keep them close to himself, to protect them from everyone, even the law, when they came knocking. The mammal started, and so I stayed back, allowing myself to agree with the police reports that this young vigilante, who couldn't be older than 18 as Shoyuta had stated that they were way too small when they had first started, had a soft kind voice that eventually became snarky in a way that could not be faked, and assumed that they had some sort of mental quirk. Possibly intelligence or analytical, as the information kept on springing up around Japan just seemed so magnificent and refined. Nezu's paw tapped methodically against his desk, though the other possibility had been some sort of quirk that allows the user to escape or go unnoticed in a split second by how quickly they could disappear before the police or heroes could take them in. However, the urgency to capture the Jumpy Bunny doesn't seem to matter as much when certain agencies secretly use Null's informant or analysis skills to solve their own cases for them. The Chimera hummed to himself. That point was only to connect to the escape quirk theory, since they would use that as an excuse if they were to have ever been caught having actually used the information to do their work, claiming they never saw the person who handed them their golden ticket and so it could have just been a whistleblower. It was all the same info that Izuku knew by, not so actually legally, hacking into the police database. No one ever thinks of quirklessness as a possibility. So imagine my surprise when I see the same vigilante, Null, sneaking into Yui undetected. No alarms set off as he did so, like he belonged here. And while that could simply be the case of a well-done forgery of a student's ID, even a stolen ID possibly, Imagine my surprise when I see the same vigilante sneaking almost through the shadows to the dorms. Oh, I've been so damn careful. Izuku's throat felt so dry. I hid everything. I've been doing this for years, even messing with the cameras and sensors so that no one would be able to spot me coming and going, how? He knew getting out of the dorms would be harder than usual, but it had been a year. Nezu wouldn't have sat on this information for an entire year. It was a shock, truly, that on the one night I decided to stroll the grounds for some fresh air, that said vigilante was sneaking into the school while avoiding all my intelligent detection bots, sensors and backup security with quite some skill. They seemed quite injured as well, blood almost soaking through their disguise as I could smell it from where I stood. Nezu's smile got more and more eerie as he continued to speak. I watched as they began climbing up the wall of the 2A dorms and onto the balcony of one of its students. Didn't take much digging to know it was young Shinso Hitoshi's room. No. With some more investigating on my own, at that point, I found that every camera that night had been subtly pointed just a bit off from where they usually stayed, only to eventually be set back to the correct position and the right feed a little after an hour that I checked. You truly are marvelous at hacking, young Midoriya. Even I might not have known about the subtle change, especially with live footage occasionally being fed into the slightly altered footage that had also been added. Just the thought about what you can learn under my tutelage makes me feel exhilarated. Looking into Null a bit more, just everything seemed to fit alongside you. As if the puzzle had finally been put together right before my eyes. You missing the sports festival the first year, much to my own disappointment, and Null being in the same place as Stain, to effectively stop the slaughter of Ingenium, seemed just so convenient now that I was looking into it. Izuku didn't look away from the mammal as he spoke. Then there was the second time Null was seen showing up to stop the same villain from slaughtering young Ida from some hopeless, petty revenge against the man who didn't even severely injure his hero brother. If I remember correctly, Null got injured, escaped from custody after a Nomu tried to snatch them away, only to not show up to patrol for a few weeks after the entire incident had happened. Most likely healing from said injuries. Nezu pet his head to the side, looking back at some old footage. You, young Midoriya Izu, had also been in some pain even if you hid it quite well. This wouldn't have made sense seeing as there would have been no reason for you to have been anywhere near Hosu at the time. You are a general education student, after all. At first I would have just assumed that some form of quirkless discrimination could have played a part of your pain, but it seemed as if Shinso Hitoshi continued to give you disapproving looks at that time rather than extreme concern. His beady black eyes glimmered again, and so another piece of evidence had been added to my growing pile of the connection between you and Null. Nezu. And then there is the information the police and heroes, who were searching for young Bakuga's location after he had gotten kidnapped at the first year's summer camp, that had been practically thrown into their laps as Null willingly spoke loud and clear through the speakers to yell the information while also scolding a few heroes while doing so. One more critically than others. The rat hummed to himself again, as if he was proud, because he definitely was. While I can't officially make claims that directly relate to that event, I can infer that you would also be directly involved, considering not only your friend, Todoroki Shudo, was in Class 1A, but you seem to have a deep hatred for All Might, the hero Null scolded the most and yelled as he was planning to burst in without a single backup plan in sight. Nezu. Izuku didn't even try to hide the absolute malice dripping off his tongue as he cut off the a-hole before taking a long deep breath. Just tell me what you want and we can go from there. I am tired of this game and I want to see where everything stands between you and I. He had to give in. With a slight huff the principal nodded, turning his computer screen around to show every ounce of information the rat had on him and his vigilante persona. Every instance where Null was out and about, but Izuku was nowhere to be seen, even when he was supposed to be at home or in the dorms. Times where his injuries, or perceived hurt from subtle limps and winces of pain, all conveniently lined up from moments where Null would get absolutely destroyed by some villain, or he missed an embarrassingly easy parkour move, and it was caught on camera. Even if Izuku tried to cover up some of the more openly obvious injuries with heavy-duty makeup, it could be noticeable if you knew where to look. There was even information on the true private life that he desperately tried to keep hidden. The fact that the rat knew he actually lived alone somewhere, his mother being murdered when he was 11, was frustrating and infuriating at the same time. If the Chimera had been so interested in him, shouldn't he have been concerned, even just as the principal of his high school, to try to give him the option of help? He didn't need it, or rather he would have refused it and run away desperately, but one would think that he would have done so anyway, especially if the BSRD actually did want Izuku as some sort of student, making the offer not just an elaborate ruse. Nezu used his home life as another piece of useful evidence alongside his not-so-legal activities such as hacking into the system to make it seem like she was still alive. To make it look like she was just gone, away on business, leaving Izuku to fend for himself and visiting quite often. Most don't look twice at a quirkless kid who is abandoned, and so no one would care enough to actually call it in. Hacking into his old junior high to change his records was bad, but it wasn't like he had any choice. If he left it as it was, the possibility of him transitioning to an online school would have been dreadful. The school he wanted to enter really only cared about his grades, and while they were sometimes abysmal, the zeros for cheating, when he wasn't faking just getting 70s, was all they really needed. However, if they would have noticed instances of him not coming to class or refusing to do work, then the new school would be wary of his past and would maybe find his work not credible since all classes were run remotely. So it really was just about having good, or average, grades with scene progress, and so they didn't even check for a quirk when he had transferred over because everything seemed normal. Changing, or deleting, the more incriminating lies about him from the Aldra database was also essential for moving forward in his life, like how his mom would have wanted him to do. Without changing those records, he wouldn't have been able to even apply to UE. One look at the more disgusting, scathing reviews from all his old teachers, all fake and sabotaging him of a future, and they would have denied him immediately. And as this was the only non-quirkless death-promoting school close to home that allowed quirkless teens to join, it was his only chance if he wanted any sort of high school diploma. Sure, Bakugo hated him and didn't want to see him set foot inside said school, but Izuku was sure his ex-childhood friend didn't even know his range of alternatives, which was nearly null. The similarities between his notebooks and some of the information given to heroes, mostly underground, and the police were possibly the most damning. Izuku will curse the day he brought that notebook to class until his dying breath, especially since he had to take out that code from his multiple other codes that were meshed together to trick anyone who figured one out. Unfortunately, Nezu was someone who would only need one cracked code to deduce the rest. To his credit, it wasn't as if Izuku knew the rat had already set his beady little eyes on him at the time, and so he didn't know that Nezu had been tracking him through his many cameras. What is it you want? Me to be your student? You did all of this? Izuku waved his hand at the computer screen. To just control the situation and force me to be in whatever this is with you? Something that I seriously don't want? You want me to escape my freedom and join you for what? World domination? A successor? Or do you just want information because I can assure you there is still one doctor out in the world that has experimented on you? And that last one was most definitely the one that pushed them to give you that scar. He not so subtly traced his finger down his own green eye as if to mock the hero in front of him. What is it you truly want, Nezu? The aura surrounding the two of them was absolutely horrendous. Two living beings who had gone through so much were just staring into each other's souls as if there was nothing else to glance at. I do want you as my student. Before Izuku could protest, the rodent held up his paw. But I know that, by just how much you are against it, that you won't do it that easily. And so I will offer you another option. His dusty green eyes narrowed as the rat continued on with his current job pitch. You will join the second year's hero exam. But in doing so, you need to reach at least an 80% completion rate to be able to fully choose whether or not you will be my student. If you succeed in getting at least an 80% on the exam as a whole, I will stop pursuing you and will allow you to choose whether or not you want me as a teacher. That can't be that bad? The only issue is that the second-year exam changes every year to keep it fresh and interesting. They do bring back old exams to do it again, to see how a new batch of heroes will react during it, but it isn't as easy to predict which test each new year would get. Especially since the previous year's hero course exam, for the first years, was fighting all the teachers in order to gauge if they could solve their own weaknesses and prove they can work through them. It was a complete switch up from just fighting robots from the hero practical exam, which, in the school's defense for the change, would have been boring. It wasn't as if Izuku watched the exam. He is in general education, of course, but Shudo had spoken about the ins and outs of the test previously. So what would this second-year exam be like? Now I'm sure you are curious as to what it will entail, but I am interested if you have any idea about what it could be. You seem to have a lot of knowledge over Yui's history as a whole, and so it would please me greatly if you could guess it correctly. Another test. He knew that that was what this was, but at this point did Izuku even care? He couldn't even hide the eager glow in his eyes to know. Sure, it was hidden behind his anger and disappointment at his freedom hanging off the edge of a rooftop, but the knowledge of the exam, and how random it seemed to be every year, did pique his interest. Nezu wouldn't give him a stipulation of making it to 80% if there wasn't a reason for that number to be so incredibly hard to get to. In fact, most hero exams don't even have to do with percentages at all. It's mostly, did you succeed in attacking the enemy or strategizing the best way to do so? Or, teamwork and supporting one another to succeed in the same goal. Though there was also the requirement of somehow using big and flashy quirks to get the job done in a way so that when the public sees their new heroes they would get immediate support and fame. From his knowledge, however, management and business with HR hasn't, and won't, be implemented until later on their second year after summer break. Which is dumb in Izuku's opinion, as these heroes to be, especially after the cluster F of their first year, have already been in the public eye and should have had that training last year. So why the percentage unless this test has a win-lose percentage rate? And why would Nezu make it so his minimum success rate was just 80 and not a complete 100? Unless it has been extremely hard for people in the past to get that high if they were able to do so at all. Right, maybe no one has ever gotten to 80 so. Really? Izuku furrowed his brow in frustration. Heroes versus villains, or would you call it Yakuza versus the Force? Snakes and ladders perhaps. Izuku crossed his arms over his chest as he huffed angrily. What are you calling this little game of yours this time around, and should I suspect that I would be the leader of the losing team? Correct, you are young Midoriya. Nezu snickered, clasping his paws together. This upcoming exam is the infamous Heroes versus Villains exercise, though as the villain team is one that you will be commanding, you can name yourself however you like. Villain, criminal, Yakuza, vigilante. That is all up to you. Though I do suspect you won't want to give vigilantes a bad name, as you will need to do some completely devious things in order to complete this exam to its fullest extent. And I already know how much Stain has given the term vigilante a bad name in the past, and that you have been trying to get rid of that filth from the term so diligently. This is why Nezu seemed so damn certain that he had won. In this game that he concocted, was his certain victory to get Izuku as his own personal student. Why was he so interested in the smart, quirkless kid anyway? Sure, he was a genius in his own right, but he didn't want to learn from the sadistic rat. He wanted to continue on the way he was, and he was just fine with that. But whatever the principal wants he gets. So setting him up as the villain leader, a team that has never succeeded over a 30 percentile mark, is a sure win for Nezu. He would have no choice but to join Nezu in his office for classes, and Izuku's unwilling studentship is his for the taking. Even while knowing the entire situation would just be some sort of trick, a ruse. The student title being just a name. And if I say no to all of this, he huffed, fingernails digging into the skin of his arm, if I just say no to this whole thing, what will you do? Obviously, it is my duty as a hero, a concerned teacher and principal to turn in all the evidence I have of you into the police post-haste. And didn't the hair on the back of his neck just bristle at those words? Surely the police would be excited to have this information in their hands to finally capture the elusive informant vigilante that has been causing a ruckus in the underground for years now. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Oh, that's it? You will send me to jail just because I don't want to be taught by you. Of course your accomplices would also be facing consequences. Now that instilled fear in him, I don't have any accomplices, Nezu. I strictly work alone. Sure, Eraser sometimes is just there, but he is a hero and does the work by himself with me being a menace next to him. And I assure you that is exactly what he would tell you. Even Naomeso will be able to tell you that that is the truth. Of course, but I'm not talking about young Shoyuta, no. Izuku visibly swallowed. I'm merely speaking about young Shinso and Miss Hatsum. What? That demed grin Nezu had made Izuku want to break him. They don't work with me. They have never worked with me or helped me in any way. How could you say that? They may not have, Null, but considering young Shinso is your partner, and seemingly helps you keep up with the injuries that you may return with, that could look very implicating. Nezu finally brought his own tea back up to his mouth, taking a long sip to extend the time, to cause Izuku to stew in his increased burning hatred. Hatsum, on the other hand, could have very well made up most of the gear you use to patrol. She doesn't though. Yeah, we talk and hang out and bounce ideas back and forth, because we are friends, but I have never used anything she has built in my own personal arsenal. Izuku growled. So what you're saying is that, no matter what I do that, if I don't play your demon game, you will get them both in trouble? Even though they are innocent in any crime other than association. That is correct. You are evil. To some. There was absolutely nothing he could do. Izuku had to play along. He had to join the DMN Hero exam on a team that has always been set up to fail. And he had to win if he wanted to keep any of his freedom intact. Are we under the same understanding, young Midoriya? With a long brought-out breath and an angry nod, he finally responded. Yes, I understand and agree to your terms. Every tentative sip of his coffee carried a glare with it, depending on who decided to make the tiniest bit of noise as they waited for the meeting to start. Shoyuta didn't know why Nezu decided to have the second-year hero-student practical exam conversation separate from the first and third-year class discussion, but there was just something that felt off about the whole thing, obviously. The rat always seemed to easily make the air around the school thick every time he found something that seemed to excite him. Considering the second-year hero exam was clearly the something that made the a-hole thrilled, could be bone-chilling to most people. Not that that FING mattered when the BSTRD made the meeting first thing in the morning. Actually earlier than what was usual for them all. It could have been simple, hell, a relatively normal time for most teachers to stroll in to do extra prep for the day, but of course Nezu wouldn't have made his lives easier by starting at that time. It had to be set at a certain time that Shoyuta knew he was either going to have to pull an all-nighter or only get a total of 2 hours of sleep after a week of little to no sleep as it was. It wasn't as if he could just get home and slip into bed with his husband while wearing his dirty, muddy and slightly bloody uniform, after all. He needed to make sure he didn't wake anyone up as he downed another juice pouch, as he didn't have the energy to silently make a quick meal for himself, took any of the medication including the ones he had been given after the USJ incident the previous year, before checking on his daughter and heading to bed. Surely the rat did this to spite him and him alone by being the only underground hero who takes his job way too seriously, choosing to patrol most nights. He would go out every night, like he used to, but with Eri he had been forced to, at least, take a couple nights off just in case. It did upset his routine in checking in with Null, though, and caused him to worry about the kid every time he did find him sitting on their rooftop, coffee in hand while waiting for the hero to show. Sure, being able to message the kid whether or not he could make it eased up some of his worries that Null might feel abandoned, but just knowing that a child was then left out there alone on the streets, just risking his life doing gods know what, terrified him. Zashi had drilled it in his head that Null trusts him, for the most part, and if he was truly hurt or needed help he would be contacted. Still, he couldn't help but worry. So as he sits in the meeting room, taking sips of the coffee his wonderful husband had just refilled for him, he glowers at anyone who decides it's the best time to speak. You know that face doesn't work on me, Shoyuta. Nemuri smirked as she walked into the room, stretching her arms over her head, letting her back crack as she did so. Shoyuta only made it his mission to glare at her harder. What cup are you on, like 5? Sekijuru decided to open his big effing mouth, which only made Shoyuta want to kill him more so than usual. Look, we all don't want to be here. And we all didn't just get home 2 hours ago with only 1 hour of barely useful sleep. He responded to the blood-quirked hero, This is to torture me. And why would Nezu want to torture you? Other than the fact that he's been doing it since I was a teen? The erasure hero raised one brow. And even if you don't bring all that trauma up, I want you to think really hard. I know that is pretty difficult task for you and your tiny little brain, but do it for little me? Why do you think Nezu scheduled such an early meeting? Christ eraser, he heard ectoplasm mutter whilst Vlad just glared daggers at him. That man better be careful or that vein on his forehead will burst. How about this? I'll give you a minute to figure out why Nezu planned this meeting this way, and when your one brain cell can't compute what the right answer is, I'll tell you out of the goodness of my heart. He took another long sip of his coffee while making sure to not look away from Sekijuru as he did so. And don't say that that isn't enough time, because that is longer than the rat would give you to answer one of his questions after studying under him for only a week. The room didn't necessarily go silent, as the two men just glared at each other, but no one started any conversations as the seconds went by. Of course, Sekijuru wasn't smart enough to know why Nezu called this meeting. He just didn't understand the mammal like he did. Beziash, the sound out of Shuda's mouth was unexpected but not entirely surprising as the man crossed his arms over his chest in an X formation. Time's up. Have you figured it out yet? When Vlad just continued to press his mouth in a tight, thin line, the erasure hero scoffed. The rat is excited. That is why he scheduled this meeting so DMN early and why we should all be scared. That monster has something up his sleeve and is eager to let whatever it is out. Right, you are young Shoyuta. The man in question was the only one to not jump at the arrival of Nezu. Theoretically, all of his coworkers should be better than most when it comes to the principal's entrances. The fact that they all jumped out of their skin is embarrassing. Except Hisashi was perfect in every way, and he would never make fun of his hard-of-hearing husband for not noticing the rat hiding in the vents. With a harsh thud, 2 stacks of paper were tossed into the center of the table. The rat was smiling. Sure, that was normal, but the slight hum that escaped the mammal was frightening. What happened? Why was he so excited? What are his kids about to be put through? As Nezu continued his tune, he made sure to take one packet and place it in front of each one of his faculty members, while the rest of his coworkers stay stunned, in horror, as the mammal kept up his nonchalant appearance, one that was much like if he had just won the lottery and didn't have any care in the world. Shoyuta snatched up the paper. Of course. Why? Shoyuta didn't even try to hide his malice after reading those cursed words. Hero versus villains. You know this is always a losing battle no matter how much the other team tries. The heroes always win. Not to mention the mental concerns we will have to deal with later. And considering what they already went through last. Hero versus villains. Yagi opened his mouth while tentatively picking up the same sheet of paper which Shoyuta was still glaring at, him having refused to actually look up at Nezu's chaotic enthusiasm. Apologies All Might, but I don't believe you took this test during your tenure. So it is of no surprise that you wouldn't know about this specific practical exam. Nezu smiled, sitting in his tall chair while sipping a cup of tea that just showed up from somewhere, though a few of your coworkers can explain it to you as they did have this exam at the time that they were attending Yui. It felt like effing hell and anxiety all in one. Shoyuta rubbed his temples before not so subtly glaring at the rat with justifiable hatred. He was the leader of the villain team during his second year and got slaughtered in just 2 days. It didn't help that he only had 7 people on his team, and that was with using the loopholes in the system to get other classes in on it. Zashi had made fun of him for not being able to corral other people to his team due to his whole attitude of not wanting to make friends. So it wasn't that much of a surprise that the odds were stacked against him. You did make it to the highest percentage that the villain team has ever secured in the past. Which was 13 tilted their head to the side in interest. Now more awake, he sighed, choosing to run one hand through his hair as he stared at the paper. Only 30%. Zashi, Oboro and I lasted the longest. But during one of the objectives we got ambushed by roughly 22 students. The rest we had already killed or got rid of in some way. We were just too outnumbered. Shoyuta sunk in his chair and yet couldn't help but let a smirk creep onto his face as he hid it in his capture weapon. Went out fighting though. Wait. Ectoplasm raised his hand to stop any murmurs that had started around them. Did you say you only made it through 30% of the exam? With a roll of his eyes, Shoyuta nodded. And that was the best anyone has ever done? Before he could speak up again, Hisashi sighed, almost as if remembering everything they had been through during their own exam 14 years prior with absolute clarity. There are objectives given to both teams. The villain's dash. Or Yakuza. I remember hearing a story about when Endeavor was the hero team leader and the villain team decided to go by Yakuza. Nemuri hummed while still slowly reading through the packet in front of them with all of the rules. Endeavor did this exam but not Yagi? All Might graduated before that prick, so I wouldn't be surprised if this game was used after he was gone. Shoyuta almost snarls out the word game because that is what this was. A sick game that the rat was running again, no matter what anyone else could say. This test has always been rigged for the good side. Anyhow, Zashi continued with a huff. Both teams get a load of objectives and 5 days to complete them under 24-hour surveillance by us. As far as I know, they are supposed to be balanced, but considering the villain team does consist of heroes in training, most are just reluctant to actually do any of the nitty-gritty. Yeah, no. He shrugged before getting up from his seat. Shoyuta nodded while flipping through his own packet, and it isn't as if I failed because I was only able to clear 30% of the objectives. They are used as a way to make them take their roles seriously. It is calculated into the final about how many you were able to complete, but it is also a way to give them ways to actually show off their skills that they had learned through their training in efficient ways, despite one side needing to do so while acting as a villain themselves. And why do we want the new generation of heroes to act like villains? All Might hissed through his teeth, bony fingers tapping away at the table. Shouldn't we be against this entirely? With a sigh, Shoyuta sat up in his seat completely. It's better to try and understand how villains and criminals act so that when they are apprehending them they aren't as surprised. He took a large chug of the rest of his coffee before grimacing, knowing that it was now empty. They would still be heroes in training after the whole DMN thing is over, and when it's said and done they will be more informed and less caught off guard during a real villain attack. Not that both his and Sekiju's classes hadn't already dealt with real villain attacks despite only being first years. Plus, the villain team will most likely be put into more counseling right after the fact. Ryu muttered mostly to himself. It really did take a toll on most of the kids who were forced to play the bad role or chose to join that side, usually because of some emotional relationship with the leader, especially if they put too much of themselves into it. And unless the villain leader has a way of separating the hero from the villain, that trauma will show its ugly side sooner rather than later. The good roles usually were fine after this specific practical exam, but some still needed extra counseling just in case they were affected negatively at seeing their friends be villains. But these kids have fought real villains at this point, Yagi said again, so they know how to react to strong villains. Villains that they shouldn't have had to deal with in the first place. What about the real smart ones? Snipe rolled his head back and sighed. I mean, sure, we don't know who the chosen leaders are yet, but if the leader is smart, like Miss Yaoyorozu, then this entire exam can blow up into smoke and ash. I am so glad that you have all brought the conversation to this point already. Nezu clapped both of his paws together, silencing the room. His beady eyes continued to scan all of them while he smiled, that toothy, enthusiastic grin. In a few more seconds, 2 new stacks of packets were put in the middle of the table. It didn't take too long after that for Nezu to slowly pull packets from one of the stacks to place 2 specific files in front of each of them. Bokogu Katsuki will be the captain of the hero team for this exam. That was normal. The kid had the ability to lead in a way that was just his. It was something Bokogu needed to work on to get more people to actually follow him without hostility, but it was still a good opportunity to grow. Unfortunately, that choice didn't explain why the mammal was so happy. It was too obvious to be the thing that would shake everything up just for Ned's liking. It wasn't chaotic enough. You chose? Midnight raised a brow. It isn't just done in a lottery or something. Isn't that what the teachers told the second years when they had to do this exact exam? Shoyuta shook his head. It was never random. That's just what they told us to pretend like everything was up to chance. He couldn't help but glare at the rat who was now grinning right at him with no care in the world. I'm not sure about other years, but I know for a fact that Nezu chose me to test me. I was new to the hero course and he wanted to continue our private studies more publicly, in which I ended up horribly humiliated. I would like to point out again, young Shoyuta, that you had gotten the best score in the recorded history of this genre of exam. Doesn't make me feel any better, rat. Okay, so, Bakugo is the leader for the hero team. Ishiyama nodded his cement head as he thought out loud. He has progressed quite well since last year. Still yells too much. That's just his personality show. His husband nudged his side softly to get him to notice another new cup of coffee being pushed his way. But he is much more tame than he was before. Still hot-headed, but he has gotten better. Mama sighs, even came to ask for help with some of his support items. Which is progress. The content murmurs in the room seemed to halt only when Vlad raised his hand to stop everyone. Why does the villain leader's name have an empty slot? How didn't that catch Shuta's attention immediately? Nezu doesn't just forget things when it comes to paperwork. His quirk wouldn't allow him to even if he tried hard to slack off. So the fact that Vlad was right, with the name of the villain leader being completely missing, was concerning. And so, with just 2 seconds of thinking, Shoyuta could tell that it was clearly done on purpose. That had to be the reason why the rat was so DMN chipper, so proud of himself. Who's the poor little menace that is supposed to back the losing team? Surely this isn't random, because again the choices never are. The obscure person would have to be on par with Nezu either in intelligence or chaos if it made his old teacher this happy. That would be the only thing that would make sense. I must have forgotten to finalize the paperwork after the exciting talk that had just concluded this morning. There was a 5% chance that they would turn down my very generous offer after all. Nezu hummed, taking a long sip of his tea as Shoyuta narrowed his eyes. Him also taking a long sip of his newly brewed coffee while trying to hide the fact that it was too black for his liking. This morning? Before this god-awful meeting? And what time did that student talk with you because who would choose to get up this early? Nezu smiled. Well, young Shoyuta, it just so happens that when I send an email about an urgent matter, most students get nervous enough to show up at any time even if it is early. And while his voice sounded cheery, Shoyuta could hear how strained the amusement actually was. I did send that message 2 days ago and was ignored. Shoyuta huffed at that with a small smile. I like this kid whoever they are. Which truly wouldn't be the first time for this particular student, however. This time I just added a bit of an incentive for them to show up as early as possible in order to sit and have a simple talk with me. Whatever that was didn't sound good. The bloodied cough from Yagi caught his attention as the skeleton-like man coughed into his handkerchief, seemingly too flabbergasted at even the idea. A student ignored you? Yes. And they're not in trouble? Even 13 seemed concerned over this child who they don't even know the name of yet. Maybe they didn't have any self-preservation, which could be theoretically troubling. Of course they aren't in any trouble. Liar, not because of that. He has always been prickly with me, which is quite understandable. Makes him so interesting. So, spit it out then. Which hellion gets the position? Vlad cleared his throat. I'm assuming if Bakugo is the leader of the heroes, then the villain head honcho would be someone from 2B, correct? Wrong. The complete deadpan from the rat almost got Shoyuta to laugh. Then who is it? Can't be 2 people from 2A, that wouldn't make that much sense. With an even larger smile than the one he had been using before, Nezu reaches for a pen and quickly writes down the name Midoriya Izuku in the empty slot. And while this left both Shoyuta and Sekijuru confused, initially as that was not the name of a second-year hero student, both Namuri and Hisashi gasped. Considering his husband had this kid in his homeroom the year prior, and Midnight has him now, the response from the two made sense. Of course the man wasn't stupid enough to not remember the first and only quirkless kid to try and successfully get into Yui, nor did he miss the fact that this teen was in a relationship with Shinso, the kid he mentored personally all last year. It was kind of hard not to know who this kid was just because of his quirk status alone. Everything else about him, though, was just so average and, dare he say, normal? It was as if someone didn't think hard enough he would be forgettable and slip under the radar. As for teachers specifically, Since his grades were just as on par with the persona the kid put out there, he wouldn't usually stand out from the rest of the crowd. The kid was just someone who didn't get into trouble while he turned his work in on time. Plain, average, and drifting by as if nothing could faze him anymore. Considering the boy is quirkless, Shoyuta wouldn't be surprised if that was just a mask he wore to stay safe and to keep himself unseen. The green bean. Nem looked up at Nezu with what almost looked like concern. But he's not even in the hero course. I second that. Sekijura huffed out. It doesn't logically make any sense to throw someone with no experience into this exam just so they could fail. It also doesn't help that they are quirkless on top of it. Now why did he say it like that? Like it was a bad thing? Shoyuta couldn't help but start scanning the faces of all his colleagues. I'm sorry but All Might hacked into his handkerchief yet again. I don't know who this is or who we are talking about, but they're quirkless? Wouldn't sending them into a hero exam be too dangerous for them? And how did they even get into this school? It's too dangerous here, especially considering what happened last. 1. Shoyuta held out a finger to cut the man off from his obscene tangent. There is no rule in the handbook that says a team only has to consist of hero students. In fact, it is encouraged, if you look at all the loopholes, to try and gather as many people as possible for your team. Or, at least, that is what I did during my run. He cleared his throat, now glaring daggers at the emaciated man. 2. Of course you don't know who this kid is, Yagi. You only teach heroics because you are not qualified to teach anything else, especially without a license. You don't know anyone that isn't in the hero course. Don't make me bring Shinso back into this conversation because I'm still set off at you for making it so that kid couldn't join until his second year. He got first place in the sports festival after a lot of hard work and should have been able to join class 1A with the rest of my class. Shoyuta cut in again, but it was you who convinced the board that it was too dangerous to allow that kid in for the second half of the year, leaving me to keep training him privately so he wouldn't be that far behind for when he would be able to transfer successfully this year. Not to mention the words All Might had said to Hitoshi, as he stood on the podium, still set him off. Supposedly, by the kid's own admittance, the retired hero had basically given him a backhanded compliment for winning the sports festival without showing his quirk. Which Shinso did show it, multiple times in fact, it just wasn't flashy. The man had then commented on how the way he won most of his battles, not bringing up the few times he did use hand-to-hand combat to secure victory, wouldn't work all the time and could possibly be seen as weak from outsiders. Which is all bullshit. So it was no wonder why Yagi Tashinori had a problem with a quirkless child joining the practical hero exam. Now, I don't know why exactly this kid has taken Nezu's interest, but he wouldn't have chosen Midoriya just to watch him get slaughtered and laugh, even as a punishment. Shoyuta continued, which means his quirk status shouldn't even matter. I agree with most if not all of what you say, Shoyuta. Ishiyama started, but I'm just very confused as to what captured the principal's eye about this kid in the first place other than his quirklessness. In all of my classes, this year and the last, he has always been average. Right in the center. That kiddo, Hisashi smiled, was one of the best that I had in my homeroom last year. He was also quick to learn English. He's not half bad in ethics, either. But nothing ever stood out about Midoriya. Shoyuta admits with a sigh, resting his chin on the palm of his hand as he continued to look at the booklet in front of him. The instant laugh from the rat caused a terrible shiver to run up his spine. Seeing as the rest of his coworkers also had a similar reaction did make him feel somewhat better with himself despite how used to it he was supposed to be. Because he really should be used to this mood of his former teacher, yet there was still something about the mammal that always has him on the edge of being uncomfortable. That would never disappear completely no matter how much he had been conditioned. With a final huff of air and a pat to his stomach with his paw, he chuckled once more, softly. I didn't truly believe that he had fooled all of you. He hummed whilst ignoring the stunned faces of all those around them. Shoyuta could see a small disappointed twitch of his whisker as their eyes locked onto one another for a half-second. I honestly had assumed that someone, other than myself, would have caught on by now just how much Midoriya Izuku lies. Lies? He's always seemed so nice to me, Ectoplasm taps a few fingers on the table. Even Lunch Rush said the kid always thanks him. Never once did the boy forget. Lying doesn't always equate to being a bad person. Nezu glanced at him. In this case, the mask that young Midoriya always wears to hide himself, to burrow his way into a group of people while being the last one seen, is being broken away as we speak. He has always been very good at securing it in place, and yet I want it gone. You want it gone? With a long glare into his now, again, empty mug, Shoyuta began to speak. You want him as your student. Nezu wants to be in control. Correct. Nezu walked onto the table to the second heap of paper he had left in the other stack. He has said no multiple times, but I just can't let intelligence like his slip through my paws. Sekijura held up his hand again before he entered the current conversation. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this kid have average scores in everything? Why would you want him as a student? With a smile, the Chimera kept walking, handing each teacher a separate set of papers, all except Yagi and Ryo. These are Midoriya's tests and assignments from all of your classes. As you can see, I have regraded every single one of them. But the answers are still not correct. Hisashi straightened out his glasses as he read through one of the tests in his hands. Which is odd given that Midoriya is completely fluent in English. He didn't even need to look at his husband to know that his jaw had dropped, which I know as he helps both Shinso Hitoshi and Todoroki Shudo with studying. He doesn't often drop his mask at school, but when surrounded by two people, who he is considerably close to, he sometimes takes the risk. Especially when they are forced to study in the library so Midoriya doesn't get hounded by your class, young Shoyuta. He had to admit it was interesting, sure, but what about his other subjects? Just how did Nezu know the kid had been fudging his answers to stay completely average? He may not have an intelligence quirk like the Demon Rat, but it isn't like Shoyuta is stupid. So what is supposed to jump out at him that is wrong? I've been watching him for a while, ever since his above-average score on the written exam to get into UE. He did try to hide himself, but he couldn't calculate just how much the average would have actually been for one of my tests. Nezu sat patiently in his tall chair, taking another sip from his teacup. I truly believe that he knew he had to do good enough to get into the school but didn't want to have his brain be completely shown. And yet he had still done phenomenal even though he purposely missed a few questions. With a simple gesture, Nezu pointed down at a sheet of paper, by the question number, which he didn't want to answer, or better yet, didn't want to answer correctly, he would mark it with his pencil. A single unnoticeable a random hash mark that could look like a mistaken pencil slip. A line of kanji in the question with a seemingly thicker line than there had been previously. He had been calculating what answers would give what number of points and was making sure he hit a certain quota every time. The table was silent as the Chimera continued. Young Midoriya has always been good at lying about his scores. Now this could simply be because he wanted to float under the radar, but it could also mean past experiences in school where he had to lie because of quirkless discrimination. With his own sigh, Shoyuta, again, ran a hand through his hair. Everything was becoming more and more complicated, a situation that he wouldn't have wanted to think about so early in the morning. I have spoken to him multiple times about this, but he denied it vehemently, and as I could technically not prove that he had been doing so, he continued on like normal. After my third attempt of getting him as my personal student, a chip of his mask broke off, and he stopped smiling. It was a wonderful day. The Chimera looked into his teacup and smiled. Anyhow, to be back on task with the second-year hero exam, it was a clear break from the discussion to make it clear that he wanted all of them to fall in line and stop questioning his decisions. Okogu Katsuki will be the hero leader and Midoriya Izuku will be the villains. We have made a bet between the two of us. A deal would be the better way to describe it. If he makes it to an 80% completion rate as a villain, I will no longer ask for him to be my personal student and I should let him keep going as he is. It sounded suspicious. Of course it sounded suspicious. Most words out of the principal's mouth were FNG suspicious, so there wasn't really much change there, not at all. And yet, Shoyuta couldn't help but think that the rat was clearly keeping something out about the whole thing. 80! Namuri yelled, practically knocking her chair to the floor as she stood up in a rush. But Eraser only made it to a solid 30. How could he even make it to that point? I can say that Midoriya is very motivated and, dare I say, enthusiastic to be part of this exam. Liar, why is he lying? How bad is it that he is actually? I'm sure no matter what score he gets, it will be a very interesting watch indeed. Does he want to be a hero? Vlad finally asked, now extremely wary about this entire situation. There was nothing anyone could say to change the Chimera's mind. It has been made up, and if someone even tried to press for a new pick, it would fall on deaf ears. The rat has made his decision. And he always gets what he wants. With a final look in the vampiric hero's direction, and after a long sip of his almost empty tea, Nezu finally responded. No. It was such a simple and direct answer that made this entire situation even more annoying. This was all a game for him. He was going to put this child through hell, destroying morals, all so the rat can be happy himself. All to obtain a certain victory, knowing that this kid won't make it to 80%, especially with no physical training that Shoyuta knows of. Hell, from his memory, Midoriya wasn't even in the first sports festival and didn't make it out of the gate for the second. He's a completely blank slate in his mind, and the Erasure hero has no information on what is to come. Isn't that a little scary? When was the last time Nezu had caused him to feel this overwhelmed? Well, this meeting is adjourned. Nezu smiled, and young Shoyuta said man made sure to look into those beady black eyes of his. Midoriya will be in your homeroom today, so he can be there when you announce the news of the practical portion of the hero exam. He does need to learn the rules, after all, and being in the same classroom where two of his friends reside already should ease some of the poor boy's tension. With the meeting now done, all Shoyuta wanted to do was sleep, and yet all he could do was fear for this upcoming exam. With this new unknown, there was no way he could even doze off. His mind was swimming with all the possible futures that shall arise. Was there fear about what his kids will go through? Sure, especially with such a blank canvas of a person, fear could describe this reaction. Or was that feeling building up in his chest a familiar sense of excitement? The anger building under his skin hadn't diminished even with the hour he spent in his dorm room yelling into his pillow. Sure, he could have called Hitoshi in a furious panic just to scream, but he didn't want to risk waking up his boyfriend when he already gets a limited amount of sleep as it was. And Izuku knew the boy was still asleep because he, like the sweet insomniac kitten he was, would always text him good morning, no matter what time he was waking up, including afternoon naps. And so no, Izuku was not going to threaten any ounce of dream-filled bliss Toshi was having just to sound angry and frustrated after his talk with that demon rat. Shudo was another option he could have gone to vent out all of his feelings, but, knowing Mr. Peppermint's emotional control, Izuku wasn't sure if he could actually handle the amount of information that is repeating in his own skull. As for now, he really didn't want to burn down the entire school with the help of Shudo's rage. Something that had already stopped him from doing multiple FING times, after he happened to hear some of Izuku's classmates, or random students, mock him from being quirkless. Slurs and all. Key word was now, as it does seem extremely tempting to just destroy everything that Nezu worked so hard to build. Every extra corridor, every vent to make the school feel more alive and less like a prison, Izuku would love to rip it to shreds. Not many know of Nezu's claustrophobia, but it's easy to tell just by looking at Yui in all its glory. Every new addition makes the rat feel safe and alive. A reminder that he is not being held in a cage where he is being poked and prodded at. So yes, destroying what makes the a-hole feel safe and comfortable seems extremely tempting right about now. Izuku didn't even fathom telling Mei what had happened. If he had, she would have appeared in seconds with bombs in hand to tear down everything in her wake. She often thinks of the now, the how fast she can destroy something angle. On the other hand, the informant wished she could just come to the understanding that a long game was just, if not more, satisfying. Not to mention the better results that come from a long thought-out plan. Those were always the best when trying to ruin someone. Currently, he is on step 3 on destroying Endeavor with Shudo right at his side, excited to see that man feel a heat that he won't be able to stand as his life crumbles into nothing. All 3 of his people, the ones that ground him in reality publicly and legally, will all know later during the obligatory meeting he will have with his villain team eventually. Because he will have a team. Sure, he could do this whole exam by himself, but with what he's planning it was going to take way more than just himself to completely make a fool out of Nezu and this FING exam. 20 minutes. That was all he needed to hide his anger behind a scared smile. Timid, useless, Deku who is as average as they come. The best way to hide in plain sight is to be the person everyone expects you to be. It's what worked so far and well. His facade won't be forcefully dragged out of him until preparations for the exam will begin. Or really, when he leaves his dorm room and has to face the classmates that he can't just get by unscathed. During his soon-to-be planned meeting, he will need to look strong, capable, and worth something to everyone no matter his quirk status. As long as he plays his cards right, says just the right things, Izuku is sure he will have actual people hooked on his plan. He is genuinely confident, but even Izuku knows that some luck will need to be with him for everything to actually work. After a few more sighs, he grabs his class 1A and 1B notebook and a completely empty one before beginning to write quickly. Classes doesn't start for another hour and a half, so he knew he could get to class just on time after doing some important pre-planning for the chaos that was about to surround him. Especially since he wasn't even heading to his own homeroom for announcements. He would need to go directly to Erasers, which, terrifying yes, but was going to be interesting. Because Bakugo was in his class. He isn't scared of his old childhood friend. That fear left him the day Katsuki told him to kill himself while the blonde stared down at his broken and bruised body where the 3rd years had left him. And after the rest of the day, he didn't even feel the need to run away from him anymore. Izuku had more important things on his mind and other things to run away from. If anything, the green-haired boy was more annoyed of having to be in the same room as him, knowing full well that, if the a-hole started to scream about his quirklessness immediately, some of his plans may need to change. Sure, he has multiple plans already, without even looking at the rules and objectives for the villain team, and yes, those plans will double once he gets all the information, but it would still be frustrating to have to deal with Bakugo's sheet right before anything truly begins. Such as losing instant curiosity due to immediate disrespect from at least some of Class 1A. A buzz from his phone pulled him out of his mind just enough to cause his hand to stop furiously writing. "Mornin', Bunny." And if that didn't bring up his spirits by just a tad bit, then he didn't know what would. Finally, "Good morning, kitty." Izuku sighed to himself, "Just so you know, I'll be in your class this morning," smiley face. "Why?" "Rat." Toshi knew about his problems with the principal for the last year, so Izuku knew deep down that he wouldn't have to explain more than that. He will. He has to, as both Hitoshi and Mei were brought in on whatever game Nezu has chosen to play. They are pieces now in his game to push around until Izuku submits to him. Which doesn't make him any happier. "Can you do me a favor?" "Of course. When I walk in, I need you to brainwash Bomb Boy." "I will. Never not take an opportunity to do that. See. Call him Kachin, and I'm sure he will respond immediately." Izuku waited a few more seconds while tapping his pencil against his desk as he thought, "I just need him to not yell that I'm quirkless in front of your class. He can do whatever he wants after I leave the room, just not while I'm in there. You know your status means nothing, right?" Of course, Toshi was worried about that. He was lucky to have such a loving partner that would hype him up in a split second. Raise his self-esteem anytime it waned. "Kitty, it's important. It's part of what you're learning in homeroom this morning. Need to send out good vibes of some confidence and mystery." "HPW, do you do both?" "Mystery." Izuku huffed, looking down at the small notes that he had already written, most if not all already done, the tip of his pencil now tapping against the white paper. "Wanna give me a hint?" "Where would the fun be in that, winky face?" As soon as Hitoshi stopped messaging him back immediately, most likely to get ready for school despite how tired he definitely was, that hot anger bubbled up inside him once more. How dare Nezu threaten his partner? That rat could mess with him all he wanted, send him to jail or expel him for all he cared, but his boyfriend who just wants to be the best underground hero there is? Yeah, that chimera. Nezu thinks he has already won, but he truly doesn't know the war that he started. Izuku quickly ripped out all the personalized notes he wrote and threw them into his pocket before running out of his room with a plastered fake nervous smile painted on his face. The longer he pretends, the better impression he will make on Eraser's class. That mask also meant he had to ignore the flower vase that was put right outside his door, again. He sighed, stepping over it while trying to keep his brain on more important things such as how he had done so well at avoiding Eraser's class as best as he could for the last year and a half. Well, he's avoided both hero courses since his start at UE for multiple reasons. They were loud, for one, and he feared if he had gotten too close to them any sense of his invisibility would be broken. Even those times he's been seen next to Shudo and Hitoshi, he was lucky enough to seem like he's just some random student who happens to be near them. Other times he's been able to slip away with practiced ease. Something simple to do after being a vigilante for a few years. Even those who know that Hitoshi is taken in a relationship, his current class never seemed to really look into it. When they were both in general education together, 1C definitely knew. Kind of hard not to when they would always be holding hands or giving chaste kisses on the cheek before Toshi's training with Eraserhead, but most of his classmates then either didn't care or didn't want to be involved with the quirkless kid and freaky, hero hopeful. Shudo was just an accidental hero student he befriended. Not that he wasn't happy it had happened. Early on in their first year, Izuku had noticed a burn mark on the boy's wrist. It hadn't bubbled, but as someone who was used to many burns since he was a child, he could tell that it must have hurt. With his first aid kit resting in his bag and his stubborn refusal of just leaving him alone to stare at the mark in a bathroom instead of getting help from Recovery Girl, he patched him up. Supposedly NG never left marks on him normally, especially ones that burned and bruised. Not that the BSTRD man didn't try to as some but backward way to get Shudo to use his own quirk. This time, though, the man hadn't been careful enough to only burn his left side that is mostly heat-resistant to the Flame Hero's fire. Surely Endeavor hadn't noticed the injury to Shudo's right wrist before storming out of his training room that day, leaving Peppermint with a nasty wound to cover up at school. It was just pure luck that Izuku was walking by when he had. Because then he had another reason to hate the flaming pile of trash, which he accidentally said out loud, making Shudo cough up a rare laugh, and the two of them became fast friends. Well, as fast as could happen with two very emotional and socially constipated kids could be. Anyone else in the hero course, though, he has avoided pretty successfully. Yet it was all going to end that day. Midoriya, Eraserhead normally wasn't able to sneak up on him like this. Though considering the man didn't know that he was Null, it would make sense to jump at the voice that seemingly manifested next to him out of thin air. That was what Eraser looked like with the bags under his eyes and a suspicious glare thrown in his direction. The man must not have been able to get much slumber after his patrol the night before. Honestly, Izuku wouldn't put it past Nezu to hold the second-year hero exam meeting as early as possible, after their own talk that is, just to F the man over as another sting thrown at Izuku's side as leverage. He wouldn't be surprised if he really was the cause, since the principal seems to know about their interesting relationship, like he was punishing Eraser for all the times he told the mammal no. Eraser has been a mentor, a friend, and a father figure in his life the last couple of years. Like hell he or him as Null would ever dare to say that out loud. The flurry of embarrassment always wrecks him anytime he, as a joke, calls the man Dad to his face, because somewhere deep down Izuku likes to hear him respond, yes, son. It's nice even if the underground hero is just teasing him right back. Yes, sir, Mr. Aizawa? Izuku bounces on the heels of his big red shoes, both hands gripping the straps of his backpack for dear life. The look Eraserhead was giving him was calculated, like he was trying to find every ounce of change in his demeanor. Maybe the teacher can sense the roiling anger which he's trying to hide behind his tired and plain grin. Maybe the effing rat told everyone about their deal and his, not completely unwarranted, suspicions of him dumbing himself down to hide in plain sight. That was probably the one. Whatever his initial scan was for, the hero stood back, hands lazily resting in his pockets as he stood up straight, keeping Izuku in his sight the whole time. I'll head in first. Announce that we will have a guest just for the start of homeroom, and then you can walk in when you're ready. Don't take too much time, I don't want to wait. Yes, sir. He couldn't even tell if that stutter had been a real or fake one now that he was in his complete persona. It wasn't like the man made him nervous, he just wasn't used to talking to Eraser like this. Even if their talks, sitting on a high rise, can sometimes be short and brash, the man was never able to hide the care in his voice very well. Especially since he suspects Null of being a child. He did start his informant career at 12, after all, so it would make sense for him to be right on the money about his age. So it was weird, almost uncomfortable, to not hear the same care from Eraserhead that he is just used to. But that's unavoidable. Because right now he is not Null. Izuku took a few deep breaths, pulling out 2 separate notebooks from his bag. He was going to use one for himself, obviously, while planning to hand the other one to Hitoshi for safekeeping, as it already has names for potential people he would like the boy to hand out his notes to. He knows that his partner would be able to give them out stealthily considering he had training, not just from Eraser, but from himself as well. He's going to be a great hero one day. I know that the written exams are coming up after the weekend, but the practical exams, for second years, are often more competitive with a spike in difficulty that differentiates from all your previous physical tests. Izuku heard Eraserhead mutter in front of his class. That's a good way to say it considering this specific exam has always taken a significant toll on certain students by just how hard it is. Even if you tried to contact the current third years and ask what they will be like, you wouldn't have been able to get a solid answer as they change the test every year. Sometimes old exams come back depending on whatever mood the rat is in. Eraser took another pause. So while you still have your written portion of the exam, in a couple of days, this year's practical technically starts today. Compared to years prior, Principal Nezu has decided to add an interesting factor into it that there hasn't been before. There were a few murmurs that he could hear out the door, and a spike of anxiety entered his heart. They were such a loud and excited class, weren't they? There was suddenly silence, so the vigilante could only suspect that the hero used his quirk to silently glare at them until they shut the hell up. A move that Eraser had told him about because while his quirk clearly didn't work on everyone, he looked intimidating as he used it. We will have a guest in our class that will need to hear the same rules as all of you. I expect you to be on your best behavior. You can come in now, Midoriya. With the fakest smile he can manage, trying to look as innocent and nervous as he is supposed to be, he finally enters the room to many stares sent in his direction. He first sees Shudo's confused little tilt of his head as he wasn't informed of his arrival before seeing the amused smirk on Toshi's own face. The look quickly turns sullen much to his own displeasure. The boy must have recognized the seething anger hiding within him even with Izuku trying his best to conceal it. With a quick, later, promise sign to his boyfriend, Shinso relaxed back into his seat. Sure, there were other looks he received, most curious as to why a random student was somehow connected to their practical exam, but the most interested seemed to be Ishido Mina, which only made sense knowing she is the gossiping one of Class 2A, something that he could use as leverage for this upcoming test. The one look he couldn't avoid was the seething anger radiating off of Bakugo as the boy sat up straight in his seat. His hands were held in tight fists, knuckles turning white, as he tried to not use his quirk in the middle of class. Supposedly, during his first year, the teachers, mainly Eraser, curbed that habit of his pretty effectively, which he was truly, honestly, thankful for. Bakugo bristled with anger as if the words were toxic on his own tongue. One look over at Shudo, a shake of his head, stopped the Mr. Peppermint from attacking Bakugo Katsuki immediately. He knows everything that happened in their childhood together, as does Hitoshi and Mei, so Izuku can only imagine what anger sparked in his friend as soon as that word had left Bakugo's mouth. What the F are you doing here, you uzel? Hey, Kaken-dash. Huh-dash. Sit still, shut your mouth. With an exaggerated huff from himself, Izuku chuckled. Hitoshi's impressions were always spot on. It most likely had to do with his perfect pitch. Thanks, Toshi. I was already nervous as it was and it's been so long since I saw Kakakin, I'm sure he wasn't expecting to see me or for this. Whatever this is exactly Principal Nezu didn't say anything. The lie, while working for everyone else, seemed to not work on Eraser as the man must know about his meeting with Chimera. Hell, he probably didn't believe this whole act anymore because of this whole DMN situation. That most likely means all the teachers are now onto him as well. That's going to be frustrating. All their eyes will be on him, now, which is the exact opposite of what he wanted. Oh, holy sheet! He whipped his head around to look at Kaminari Denki, who looked as if he was about to keel over from laughter. You called him Kakin? You called Blasty Kakin? What do you mean he hasn't seen you in so long? Ashido, as expected, seemed to be leaning over her desk excitedly. Do you know each other? With an innocent tilt of his head and a slight blush painting his freckled cheeks, Izuku nodded. Uh-huh. Oh, we grew up together. He could tell by the way both Shudo and Hitoshi stiffened that they weren't really comfortable seeing him this cheery when speaking about his past. It was new to both of them. He'd known him since we were in diapers. Boo, but we did kind of have a falling out, but that's okay. You have? The deadpan of the underground hero didn't faze him as much as it should. He's just so used to talking to the man in the dead of night. Know him, that is? Yep. Izuku continued to smile. He was always going to be a great hero, I just knew it. The lie tasted awful on his tongue, but, he probably wasn't happy to see me because that's just how he is, you know? Izuku tilted his head to the other side, letting his curls flop with the movement. Maybe he was worried I would say a bunch of embarrassing stories about him. That, right there, caught the attention of more than just Ashido. Which is all he wanted, what he needed. He needed them to be intrigued with this mystery student, to want to know more information. If the informant was correct, from knowledge of previous hero versus villain exams, there are exactly 2 days to officially sign up for what team you want to join. That would mean that day was the most important one to spread out your pitch, especially since more kids already know what team they want to be on immediately when they are first told about the test. The next day, for Izuku, means going around to the business and management courses for some help on his side. Though maybe heading to the support course would also be beneficial when everything is said and done. Because while he and Mei are geniuses with gear, and he plans to bring his best friend into the fray with him no matter what, having the support course students help with designing and creating new suits and clothing would be fantastic. But today, this day was the most important, so the more he can hook with intrigue the better. While I appreciate Shinso for quieting down the situation, I would like you to not use your quirk on regular basis inside the classroom. You are in the second-year hero class now and should know better. Eraser scolded, but he could tell the man wasn't pushing as hard as he would his other students. Clearly he saw Bakugu about to explode, figuratively and physically. Yes, sir. Hitoshi smirked and Izuku had to hide his own small chuckle. Head to the back next to Todoroki and Shinso if you can, Midoriya, and then drop your quirk. With an excited nod of his head, he did just that, choosing to deftly run his fingers through Shudo's hair before putting his notebooks down on Hitoshi's desk. Said boy didn't seem to even glance at the placement and just took the chance to put his hand on top of his own. As soon as his brainwashing ended, Bakugu did try to explode, and would have, if Eraser hadn't been quick with the draw in wrapping up the boy in his capture weapon. His quirk pointed at Bomb Boy. It was weird to see him do it not in the dead of night and not using it on him to get Izuku to stop hopping around. As Eraser had put it, your energy is giving my a FNG headache. Though the quirkless boy also suspected that the man sometimes tried to test his reaction time still, despite having been taught by the hero how to be better at it. Stay quiet. We have a lot to talk about before homeroom ends. Ida, Yorozu, if you could please hand these out to everyone. The man sighed whilst holding out a stack of papers. The rules. Hero versus villain, exercise, sir? Uraraka finally muttered out loud as the rest of the class did a cursory read of the packet. From Izuku's own experience, in people watching, he was sure that at least some of these students, if not 70% of them, wouldn't read over the whole thing diligently enough or find any of the many loopholes that were hidden within. With an exhausted nod, Eraser started. Your practical exam before summer, this year, will be Heroes versus Villains. You will be able to choose which side you want to be on and what leader you will like to follow. Each commander will receive a list of objectives that the team will have to complete. Aizawa held up one stack of paper in his left hand. Heroes must complete their own set of tasks for points as well as try to capture those who are on the villain team. However, in order to capture, you need to have proof of any villainous activity. He held up the second packet in his right hand that Izuku knew would be for him with all his objectives inside. The villain team has their own set of objectives that they will need to complete for points in the exam as well. The objectives should be different from each other as they seem to be more villainous. Their side doesn't need to capture the heroes and can kill them if they need to. Basically just eliminating them out of the game. Eraser's eyes scan the entire class. If the hero leader dies, the test is over and no more points can be gained. The same goes for if the villain leader is killed. However, just because you kill or capture the opposite leader does not mean you automatically win or pass, so think wisely. With another pointed look at Bakugo, because he would have absolutely gone right for Izuku at the beginning of the exam, he continued. If either commander is kidnapped or arrested, the test is not over and instead a timer will start. You will then have roughly 3 hours to get them back before the test is called complete. Though heroes will need to think carefully before that ending can actually be completed as they have their own rules. Again, this means they require evidence to do so. Now, if heroes do any of the villain objectives, they will be docked points, and the same goes for the villain team. Aizawa sighed again. It is up to the team leaders to decide whether or not you get to see the objective list. It is not confidential information, but some say in order to command the best team, only having some in the know, in order to not overwhelm, might be the best way to handle it. So keep that in mind when you choose to show or not show the set of objectives to your team. Yes, sir? Yayorozu raised her hand. Who are the leaders for this exercise going to be? Normally we would lie to all of you and say that the chosen commanders were picked at random. But because of some interference from the rat, for some unexplained reason, we can't do that. With one hand he pointed at Bakugo. Bakugo Katsuki will be the one commanding the hero team, hopefully, to victory. The way Eraserhead said it even sounded like he expected them to win. Though Izuku definitely had other plans to ruin that narrative completely. Bakugo couldn't help the confident smile that dawned on his face, cracking his knuckles as he hollered, "How of course I'd be the leader of the heroes because I will be the best one over all these losers." If he was any louder he would have missed it when Eraser then pointed to him. As for the villain leader, that gift has been granted to Midoriya Izuku from Class 2D. He should have been ready for how every single person in his class turned to openly stare at him, but it did catch him off guard. Of course they would be confused as to why some random Gen Ed student had infiltrated into their hero exam. Intrigue continued to be sparked in them at least, but the doubt sure as hell was shining brightly. He wouldn't be surprised if Jiru was listening to his heartbeat pick up as he continues to stand by two of his favorite people, feeling his anxiety skyrocket through him like that bullet he was once shot with. Him? It was as if Bakugo couldn't tell if he wanted to laugh or scream at him. Chuckle over a worthless, pathetic Deku joining the hero exam so the living bomb could theoretically destroy him must be tempting. On the other hand, the boy must think he's still trying to be a hero and so probably wants to kill him for being in the same test as him. Why the F was Deku chosen? It's the principal's decision, Bakugo. The glare from the man didn't seem to quell the blonde's anger, and whatever the rat wants, the rat gets. But the nerd's quirk dash. Shuto. And with one silent mutter to the boy next to him, Bakugo was frozen solid in ice. He was so calm as he did so, rage only showing in his eyes as steam, from the warm air conflicting with the sudden cold, drifted off the right side of his body. Even Eraserhead didn't seem to expect the explosion from the boy sitting to his right. The look of confusion he wore quickly returned to his usual expression of deadpan indifference. Todoroki, it is not appropriate to use your quirk inside the classroom. Mr. Aizawa had just reinformed us all of how it is disrespectful to do so. Still, shocked Izuku how much of a stickler Ito was for the rules, considering he got saved by Null when he tried to find and kill Stain the year before. Hypocrite. To that Mr. Peppermint only shrugged, which earned a few more strokes of his hand through the boy's hair to calm him down. Sure, he was the one who allowed Shuto to release his pent-up rage that had been building with every Deku yelled. The soft command came from the tone of voice in the way Izuku said the boy's name, but it didn't mean Shuto didn't deserve head pats for doing so. If his quirk status was released while he was still in the room, the intrigue would be lost. At least when he left there would be some who wouldn't believe the boisterous explosion quirked user. Can you please thaw out Bakugo and help him to Recovery Girl to see if there are any injuries? Eraser just seems so exhausted. Then find me before your lunch so we can have a discussion. Yes, sir. Well, any questions? How long is the exam if we are starting today? It was Ida's turn to ask while he kept his eyes on Shudo. Said boy was currently thawing Bakugu's head out of ice rather quickly, which you could tell just by how loud the room suddenly got from the angry blonde before Eraser used his scarf to stop him from speaking. The practical exam will take 3 weeks starting today. This exam will be eating up a week of your summer, but considering the second-year summer camp is still happening, it would be an easy transition. Both teams will be allowed to prepare for 2 weeks, and then the actual test lasts 5 days. Depending on how things go, I wouldn't count on it taking that long. The longest someone pushed this test was for 2 days out of the 5. Oh, Mina smiled. 2 full weeks. That's a lot of time to prepare. And you'll need it. With an exhausted breath released, the man ran a hand through his hair. If that was your only question for now, I have nothing left to say on the matter of your practical exam, but I would suggest reading through all of the rules thoroughly. If you think of anything later that you want to ask me, I would really like to say don't, but am firmly obligated to help you to a certain extent. What does that mean? Ojiro seemed confused by the statement, but Izuku understood it quite well. Teachers aren't allowed to help with anything exam-related, seeing as this is supposed to be student-run teams. What he isn't saying is that the faculty can help them with the exam as long as they don't openly express that that is what they want out of the situation. So, if Izuku were to go to Snipe and ask for gun training for his team, he would need to make up an excuse as to why he wants to learn without saying it's for the exam. Everything is about loopholes, and Izuku is really good at finding them. Midoriya. He snapped his head up to stare at the man. Here is your objective list. You are allowed to go back to your own homeroom now. With a nod to that, he smiled. Izuku took the time to drape himself against his boyfriend's back for a final hug. His hand subtly pushed the many notes into Hitoshi's pocket as he did so. Please hand these out for me as subtly as possible. This also means Class 2B as well, and make sure to send everyone to our room. May will check it for bugs before any of you get there after classes let out. With a final kiss on Toshi's cheek and a wave to a very satisfied Todoroki Shudo, he grabbed the packet from Eraser's grasp. Mr. Aizawa? He waited for his hum of acknowledgement before continuing, Can I ask you a couple of questions outside this room? The man nodded before sending a threatening look to his class to behave before leaving with him. Sure, he has many questions about the exam and the many loopholes, but he only had one about the actual test that he needed to know immediately. About one of the objectives, specifically. So, I have 2 questions. Izuku mutters, flipping open the page before pointing to one of the objectives. Betray a teammate, contradicts with this other objective, keep all of the villain team together without losing a single member. He starts, making sure to stare directly into the man's eyes. Most of these seem to not have as much of a blatant contradiction, which makes me believe that there is a way to get around it in which I can still win completely with gathering every objective. In turn, that means I plan on getting every single point. And while I know you cannot tell me directly how to succeed, I can offer my own solution to see if you agree if it's possible. Izuku absolutely didn't miss the curious raise of an eyebrow that Eraserhead gave him. Correct? He hummed to himself for a second before he continued. And so I would like to ask you, one of if not the smartest teacher, not counting Principal Nezu into this mix, at UE, since you would be able to understand my theory without me needing to describe the ins and outs of everything I'm planning. He took a deep breath. That being said, when someone signs up for each team, they can't leave them. That is a direct rule, but if someone believes they are on my team, let's say they didn't read the rules or read fake ones and they fully believe they have switched sides, wouldn't that count as a teammate? Even if it's not legally binding. Didn't that statement make the man smile in the way he loves? It's the grin he gives to Null every single time he hands over important information on a case or is completely enraptured in a topic to stop himself from mumbling out loud. That seems to be the case. With a mimicked grin, he snapped the packet shut. Good. As for your second question, this one doesn't have anything to do with the exam, and it's just something I've been so curious about since the start of the year. You can say no to answering this one, but I would like this brain itch to go away. Eraserhead nodded for him to continue. I know the reason why Vlad King decided on being the 2B homeroom teacher was because you decided to be the 2A homeroom teacher this year. And while I understand that move was because of whatever rivalry you two have going on, you have always been a mystery, sir. Izuku paused for a second as if trying to get his thoughts in order. I couldn't come a solid conclusion if you choose to stay with this hero class, the one which you didn't expel anyone or transfer them to another course because they all mostly had potential. This of course didn't count the one kid who dropped out right after the USJ incident because they knew they couldn't handle it, or the fact that Eraser legitimately can't expel anyone due to a certain someone being in his class, because of all the mess of last year with getting attacked. So, in a way, I suspect you chose to stay with them in hope you could actually train them to be proper heroes without the constant fear of death nipping at their backs because of the bad luck that followed Class 1A. And your second option? I wondered if you wanted to stay their homeroom teacher because Toshi was denied enrollment into 1A for the second semester last year. Possibly because someone in this school didn't let it happen. And that, Izuku squirmed in place, that you hoped you could be in a position where he could ask you questions instead of a new homeroom teacher. While the hallways were silent, other than his squirming and the mysterious sounds of someone hiding in the vent above them, he couldn't help but feel safe. That had to be how he felt being near the man who he cares about so effing much. It doesn't matter if he doesn't know he's Null, yet just being around Eraser is nice. It's too bad that as soon as the exam officially starts his secret will be out. Eraserhead is going to know that the kid he's been putting time and energy in is quirkless. His worst fear is thinking that Eraser will then never want to see him again. Claim he had chosen to lie to him this entire time. That Izuku made him think he was something special? Yeah, that is going to hurt. A little of both. His mentor finally answered. More so the second one, but don't tell the rest of the kids that. He nudged his head towards the frankly loud room. They must be excited for this exam. It's a good thing he has both Shudo and Hitoshi listening in for him to see if any of them has chosen a side that they, for sure, will be taking. Izuku nodded with a smile. Thank you for answering, Eraserhead, Mr. Aizawa. A nervous chuckle escaped him. I'm going to my homeroom now, bye. Can't you be any more awkward, a-hole? He thought to himself before hurrying away. At first Shoyuta didn't really know what to think about the quirkless child that caught the rat's attention. The blooming rage was evident no matter how hard the kid tried to hide it. It was just easy for the man to see it, as he too used to feel the exact same. And yet once the little menace was invited into the classroom, his entire personality had shifted into what he was so used to seeing in his ethics class. He continued to watch him the whole time. The passive way he said certain things was clearly manipulative for some reason that he wasn't able to bear witness to yet. That feeling he had earlier that morning, where he couldn't tell if it was fear or excitement, was now confirmed for him. He was ecstatic, excited to see how this entire exam would play out because he knew, just from the first question alone, that this was not going to be the usual hero versus villain exam that he knew, the one he had personally been through. This was going to be something completely different. And the fact that he had no idea what that could even mean itched that interested part of his brain. The rat won't even be able to comprehend what is to come. And for that he is thankful for this new piece in play that might actually get the chimera to unravel. To see him lose. The chaos this kid will bring is unmatched. He is an absolute menace, child. Even more so than your current problem child? With a satisfied hum he texted back to his husband. Null and him are very similar and should never meet. You really aren't going to tell me why you're upset, love? Hitoshi nudged his shoulder as they walked. Izuku didn't even need to look at his boyfriend to see the teasing smirk on his face was dull from worry. The boy is smart, maybe not as much as Izuku himself, but enough to know that the whole hero versus villain exam was a tool to F with the quirkless boy. Why else would he be brought in on a hero exam? Not yet. He huffed, shifting the duffel bag on his shoulder. They were currently taking their casual stroll around the school grounds to their favorite hangout spot. A place with no vents for the DMN rat to listen in on them as easily as the rest of the school. Somewhere special that he and May diligently made sure no cameras or bugs ever were replaced anytime they just needed a time to relax and not think about the school while still technically being on the grounds. There was an old shed, which is a shitty thing to call it just by how massive it is, that used to be where they stored parts for the many robots on campus. For whatever reason they never destroyed it when they changed locations, as it ended up being too small than what they had then needed it for, and while Izuku has theories, he doesn't want to actually ask a competent adult knowing they would tell him to stop going there. It's dangerous is something the competent vigilante doesn't want to hear when all he wants to do is rest. He's sure Nezu knows about it still, but Izuku had a theory that the reason the mammal didn't want to tear it down was much like the reason he continues to make additions to the school. The principal didn't want to destroy something that was technically meant to be his and feared that the school would become another prison for himself if he took it away. Taking down the shed meant taking away something that Nezu owned, which was unsettling considering it would then make him feel like it would end up just the same as when he had lost his bodily autonomy back when he had been experimented on. I promise you and May will know why I've been in a mood since this morning after everything is out on the table for these hero hopefuls to see. Izuku couldn't help but roll his eyes at his own statement. They are going to be so loud. Like you aren't loud yourself. I'm not that loud. Especially if you compare me to them. But what about when you get super excited about something and your true persona pops through? Hitoshi didn't add no to that statement, but it was absolutely implied. With all your sass you are just as loud as us, hero hopefuls. God, he loved that teasing smirk of his partner even when it was targeted in his direction. Without responding verbally, he just nudged himself against Toshi's side and let out a huffed breath. Shut up. Let me breathe a little and stop teasing me before all this goes down. I don't want to panic about this. You sure you want to do well, all of this? The lavender-haired boy motioned to the large duffel bag Izuku was hulling around, the one filled with his coded notebooks on every hero student in the course as well as his vigilante mask and voice changer. Because, you know, if you tell them everything you've hidden? I kind of don't have a choice, Toshi. He cut in. If I don't tell or show these heroes that I am capable, and not just some useless liability from general education, they won't find me competent. Then 8 plans would be thrown out, and that's just a lot of work washed down the drain. 8? Izuku couldn't help but laugh as he nodded. You've come up with 8 ways this exam will go already? Didn't you just talk to the rat this morning? Izuku shrugged. Yep. He responded with a resounding pop to the P. Have 15 total currently, depending on who will be in this room right when I get there. It all depends on who shows up. Whether it's from my notes that you handed out, just pure interest on who the F I am and why I'm doing this test with them as a leader, or they just didn't want to be bossed around by Bakugo. Which is completely understandable if you know Bomb Boy, but I mean he's gotten a little better, apparently, so maybe more people aren't that put off by his personality anymore. No wonder the principal chose you to do this. Hitoshi whistled. Still worries me as to the why, and considering you are clearly furious, I'm maybe a little nervous as well. As they got closer to their destination, he made sure to give Hitoshi's hand a firm squeeze. Don't worry about it. I mean, I'm sure you will be just as said, but like, I'm here with you and that is all that matters, okay? The shit was loud, which is so unusual for the two of them to hear. Normally the only other two that are ever in this campus warehouse, besides Toshi and himself, would be Shudo and Mei. And while Mr. Peppermint is quiet as he does homework or read, the only loud sounds are usually explosions from their favorite support student, of which have only gotten stronger since their first year, as Hatsum's experiments seem to just be getting bigger and better. So hearing the constant chattering of many students should have been alarming, but it just meant there were actually people here to hear his pitch to all of them. This meant that there were students inquiring knowledge on the villain team and its leader, his fellow second years, who actually made the competent decision to show up to the designated location at the correct time. It made him feel hopeful. Well, it was now or never. With no hesitation, he kicked open the door to the shed, only to have Mei barreling through everyone to jump onto him. She was absolutely covered in soot and oil, but didn't seem to care as the support student hugged him for what seemed like dear life. I was told you were angry. Are you? She pulled back, both hands holding his cheeks as she zoomed in on his face. Holy hell, you are angry. What happened? I want to know everything, Greenie. Mei, Izuku's eyes squinted. Did you just rub oil all over my face? She just nodded eagerly as if it didn't matter. Do you have a wet wipe on you? At that she shook her head with a nervous grin. Whoops. Seems like I forgot that part, sorry. Izuku just decided to walk to a nearby table, dropping his heavy bag onto it, before looking around for a clean towel to use. It wasn't that easy of a task to do since Mei seems to dirty them all up before she even has the idea to clean them. Eventually he does manage to make himself look somewhat presentable enough to stare at all of the hero students just staring right back at him. There were many who he sent notes to who he expected to show up no matter what, but the ones who were close to Bakugo? It was weird to see Ishido and Kaminari. It was like he hadn't really expected them but was happy that they were there. On the other hand, there were many 2B students that didn't show up, which implies they most likely have made their choice, and no matter what they were probably going to be on the hero's side, which was frustrating but understandable. It could have also been because he hadn't been in their homeroom when everything was announced, which is a huge possibility. The unknown isn't just intriguing but scary and unpredictable. What he wasn't expecting though were the students who he didn't send anything to, and they just showed up. Like as if they followed the group of villain hopefuls and suddenly they were in his base of operations. So in total, from a cursory glance of everyone who showed up, and if his job pitch does anything to keep them all here, he will probably at least have a team full of 18 students as a whole, which isn't that bad all things considered. There were a few more he hoped to convince, one specifically because he wanted to fix her quirk because he swears Uraraka has been using it wrong, but 18 really isn't that bad if you look at the history of this exam. If anything, it was overwhelming. But that's if these people want to stay and listen to him. To believe everything he has to say and offer them a total win with their side being the victor. He could only hope. Welcome to my space. Izuku just waves his hand all around him. This place is safe. No cameras or bugs, so it would be very difficult for anything to get out of this room unless it's spread around by word of mouth or phones. Though considering Mei did a cursory search around for bugs, just in case a little rat squirmed his way back in here, I would assume she also put up a jammer that should affect all your phones since this is going to be a long and complicated discussion. While Izuku hopped up on the table to sit down comfortably, with Hitoshi deciding to find a seat closer to Mei, he waited for all the hero students to check their phones. It was only natural to do so after he made the claim that they were blocked from communication. Don't worry. As soon as you are out of this very large space, your phone should work again. And that means all recording devices as well, though if you were planning to tape this too, maybe hand it over to the hero team, all the footage would be corrupted immediately anyway, and so it would be a waste of your time. Izuku waved his hand around to the many tables and seats spread out through the shed. You can take a seat if you want, or stand, but this is going to be a very long pitch as to why you want to be on my team. That is, if you want to win and get the best score Yui has ever seen, that is. He didn't even hide the slight anger that rolled off his tongue as he spoke, because I will make sure this team wins. I'm sorry, but who even are you? Awaze yelled from the back. I was kinda concerned when we found out one of the team leaders wasn't anyone we knew. My name is Midoriya Izuku. I'm from class 2D and I am the villain leader for your exam this year. He didn't even try to sound giddy about it. And before you say anything, let me talk and prove myself to all of you. Though I am curious about why some of you are here. He made sure to let his eyes linger a bit longer on Yaoyorozu and Kendo. It wasn't that he didn't want them there, he absolutely did, he just was expecting to go to both of their dorms separately to have a face-to-face talk. The fact that they are here is a nice surprise. I know most of you I sent a personalized note to try and hook you. And while most of the 2B students I wanted aren't here, most likely ignoring it because just like you, Awaze, they didn't know me or didn't even find it, are probably with Bakugo right now. I didn't have the pleasure of being in Vlad's class today during his announcement, and so these, he points to the 2A students who had all separated from the other class much to his own dislike. Students were able to see me in their class and were able to feel intrigued or want more insight on just who the F I am. Izuku sighed before clearing his throat once. I am not a hero student, I don't want to be a hero student, and have been forced into a game with a rat. That is something that I'm sure Class 1A was most curious about and why they are here in the first place. Izuku sighed, so I myself am curious, that itch in my brain wants a scratch. Why you here? No? Curiosity? The silence was nice for a few seconds before Ishido's gaped mouth made a weird sound. Oh my god. You are completely different than when you were in our class this morning. That was all a lie. Kind of? It's complicated. It worked, didn't it? Got you here? His eyes darted over to Jairu, who was playing with her earphone jacks, twirling them around her fingers before raising her hand. I got interested when you commanded Todoroki to attack Bakugo. Izuku couldn't even help but raise his eyebrow as most of the room seemed confused. I didn't command Shudo to do anything. The snort from his boyfriend did not go unnoticed. I just let him release the anger that was building up every time Bakugo called me death. Izuku pulled both of his legs up to sit crisscross on top of the table. He wanted to attack Bomb Boy as soon as he called me that horrid nickname the first time, but I subtly told him not to because it wasn't worth it, especially at that time. And then, Bakugo continued to spout bullshit, and he was going to release information that would have stopped some of you from showing up today if I was in the room when he did so, and that was not going to cut it. So you did send your guard dog after the a-hole. Toshi chuckled. The love in his eyes was frustrating since his boyfriend was clearly teasing him. The blush blooming on his cheeks were proof of that. Shut up. Shudo would have done it anyway. Why do you call Todoroki by his first name? Ashido bounced in her seat, waggling her eyebrows suggestively. Are you close? I mean, yeah. Izuku tilted his head to the tiniest bit. He's one of my best friends, and even if he wasn't, I would still call him by his given name as he hates his surname. No, since he hates Endeavor? Have none of you noticed that he doesn't like to be called by his last name? Izuku uses 2 fingers to tap at his own skull, that he flinches just slightly when he is called as such? The silence from 2, as side of the room was frustrating, so yes, he and I are close. If you're so close, why isn't he here with the rest of the 2 ABSRDs? Monoma opened his mouth and Izuku wished he had the patience to just let it slide. 1. He has already signed up with the villain team. There was no way he was going to work with Bakugo, and so under my request he is doing some quick surveillance during the hero's own team pitch meeting. Shudo will tell me who is absolutely set on being a hero, who probably already signed up for the team, and who may be willing to switch to ours. Izuku held up his hand before putting up a second finger. And 2, do not try to build a wall between the 2 classes in this safe room. I am forgiving the distrustful nature between the 2 classes today, but if it perpetuates, if you choose to stay on my team, there will be no such thing. The only way to win is if you have complete trust, and the fact that there even is a rivalry pisses me off. You are both hero classes in the same year. I love Eraser, I really do, but his and Vlad's dumb and petty rivalry only makes having you working together significantly harder. No one is better than the other, you just have different letters in your class name. Monoma's smile quickly broke as he sank down in his chair. The rest of his fellow students were looking at him with some weird amount of respect. A feeling that might break when his quirk's status officially gets revealed. Jairu looks up at him again. That, too. She mutters. When you were talking to Mr. Aizawa in the hallway, you were completely different from the boy we saw in class. You sounded smart and like you knew what you wanted. I'm sorry for listening in, but what you did just now was reminiscent of that. He shouldn't have been surprised that his conversation had had an eavesdropper, but considering Shuji nodded along with her meant that she had not been the only one. I showed up because Kyuka mentioned that you seemed smart. Momo started, and well, Bakugo is smart as well, but he also doesn't like to listen. Or that is how he has acted in the past, and so the present isn't as reliable. True to that. Mei muttered, still tinkering at whatever was on her lap. Well, Mineta did mention that he was going to be on the hero team, and well, we didn't want to be there with him. So we said we already signed up, and he immediately went to do that before we came here. So I'm just like the other option? Izuku snarked while Momo didn't even deny it. I'm fine with that, just hope you don't regret it after everything I'm going to reveal today. Honestly, I would prefer not having to reveal my secret, but if my calculations are correct, it is inevitable. I came because of the note. Well, I was also super interested. Ashido admitted, holding it out, especially since it just, hit me ya and no? You too. Juzo mumbled, holding out his own. There were a few more confirmed head nods. I'm glad I was able to hook you in with just those alone because everything I said was true. And I should know considering discrimination has been following behind me like a shadow that has been wanting to eat me whole and spit me out and off a rooftop. Izuku stopped talking for a bit, stewing in his own words. The ones I sent notes to are the ones who have been through it, not exactly equal, but definitely some of the same sheet. I was going to do the same with Miss Yaoyorozu and Miss Kendo, as well, but decided against it seeing as how I thought a better way to talk to two smart women was to sell my pitch to them directly. But I haven't been discriminated against. Yaoyorozu spoke with a confused furrow of her brow. Kendo seemed to have the same response as she nodded quickly. You haven't? Izuku raised a brow. You, a woman hero in a predominantly male-oriented industry? You, who will have to keep up with your femininity to keep high up in the charts? You, who has been forced on a diet by your parents even while knowing your quirk relies on how much you eat? She shut her mouth at that, eyes narrowing as she glares at the table in front of her. I'm sorry to put this out there, but women are still heavily discriminated against in the industry you are going into. No matter how smart, reliant, and powerful you are. Izuku breathes out deeply, before noticing another hand going up. So you just want people who are discriminated against to be here? Tsuburaba asks. It isn't an awful question considering he wasn't one of the ones Izuku had expected to show up. The informant shakes his head quickly. That isn't completely accurate. My thought process is, well, villains aren't born. They are created. And this society keeps on pushing and beating those with weak, villainous and mutation quirks down. They destroy them until all hope is lost and eventually turn to the only thing anyone has ever told them they could be, which is to become a villain. He makes sure to track everyone's eyes as he speaks, but then there is also the discrimination on the SEC of someone or their sexuality that is still heavily prominent in today's age. Izuku sighed as he closed his eyes and threw his head back. That concept is better, but if you told me Tiger from the Wild PP Cats doesn't get discriminated against, still after all this time, then you're lying to me. Anyway, they too can begin to feel as if they are nothing until villainy is all they have left. I figured those who have been destroyed over and over again, yet still have hope in their eyes, might have it easier assuming the role of a villain than someone who has been catered all their life. But Kaminari mutters, I'm not Dash. Kaminari, you get told you're dumb every day. Izuku points out, sometimes by your friends, and I know it hurts you because I understand that pain. I assume you have a learning disorder or, well, I believe there are ways to fix your quirk so you don't short-circuit because it is damaging you. But because your quirk is strong and powerful, you have been left to your own devices. I didn't send you a note because I figured you would come with a Shido or you were interested in me yourself, since I do have old stories about me and Kachin that are embarrassing for Bomb Boy, so you would be here anyway. Izuku takes a deep breath before looking Kaminari right into his golden eyes. But I can see that with all this talk about discrimination that your brain is moving a mile a minute. Because you are not stupid. And that isn't just because I'm trying to get you all to be on my team. The room was silent again. Honestly, he didn't think there would be this many hero hopefuls in one place that could be silent. I'm not saying being on my team is easy, but I will make sure you all pass. And pass with flying colors. You don't even know us. Kaibara muttered, making sure to sit back with his arms over his chest. We don't even really know you. With one hand he stopped anyone else from saying something. He opened the duffel and pulled out roughly 14 notebooks before slamming them down on the table. Our notes on all of you. Technically they're not for you exactly, since I didn't want to pull my collected 40 out of this bag, but I digress. He holds one up. These are all coded. A code that only one had been broken, and that was Principal Nezu. And even then it took the Chimera a week of spying to finally figure it out. Izuku opens one to show it to them all. These contain your strengths, your weaknesses, how to strengthen your strengths, and how to shrink your weaknesses. Whether it's with your quirk yourself, or your body, it is in here. There are support gear suggestions and costume recommendations for you for the next 10 years. Because as you get older your quirk and body will change, and so your outfits will have to as well in order to suit you properly. Izuku stared up in their eyes. If I wanted to, I could probably destroy every hero in Japan without even needing a quirk to do it, because this is what I do. I analyze, I perceive, and I figure out the nitty-gritty. I've been doing this since I was a kid. So do you really want to press your luck if I know you or not, Kaibara-san? The only ones not seemingly stunned were Hitoshi and Mei, who knew all of this already. There was no way for them not to know, seeing as when they first met him he couldn't stop talking about how cool they both were. Now that I got your attention, I think I need to be frank with all of you. A few of them whipped their heads up to look at him while others stayed stunned, stuck in their seats. This is not an exam for all of you. Are you graded? Yes, but this isn't a simple hero practical exam. Oh, there was all the attention he hasn't craved in years. This is a war. And no, this is not a war between Class 2B and 2A. This isn't even one between heroes and villains. This is a war between Nezu and I, and I'm so sorry you have all been forced into the middle of this. You dash? How? Why would he dash? That doesn't make sense. Too many voices, too many statements to keep up with as he saw the hero hopefuls start to doubt having come here in the first place. Nezu was the one who started this. He made sure the fury was in his eyes as he continued to talk. He found something out and wants to destroy everything I built in my life because I told him no. He does not like the word no. Not since he became freak. What even is your quirk? You seem so confident, but you are only a general education student. I don't even think I saw you at the sports festival. Last year or this year? Last year I skipped out. I was busy with something else that was important, which was finding Stain for the information he was promised, only to stop him from killing Native and Ingenium per their tenuous agreement. And 2, I choose not to. Izuku shrugs. I didn't want to be in the sports festival, so as soon as the bell rang I stayed in the tunnel so I could be considered out and head back to the bleachers. How else do you think I was able to write about your quirks and how enhanced they became now that you are all second-year hero students? He held up a random notebook again as reference. Nezu seemed a little peeved when we talked about why I didn't even try, but he couldn't do anything about it. So then, what is your quirk? Because Bakugu was yelling a lot about it once we all came back from lunch. Shuji seemed to wince at the memory. What? Here goes nothing. I'm quirkless. The doubt that sprung up was immediate. There wasn't any disgust or anger, just no trust that he knew what to do. That there was no way for the villain team to win just because their leader was quirkless. He waited for the yelling and mutters to be accompanied with hope draining from their eyes before he cleared his throat. I want to ask you all a question. Most of them seemed to scoff, causing him to roll his eyes. Did any of you notice how, while you all looked panicked and unsure, that the one person in this room who is always loud and confident stayed silent? He trained his eyes on Monoma, because I sure did. And while you could assume it's because he fights quirkless if he doesn't have one to copy, I know the real reason as to why he didn't have as big of a reaction than the rest of you. Aren't you all curious? Monoma almost looked frightened, as if Izuku wasn't supposed to know why he reacted the way he did. Why he didn't scoff and scream about their inevitable failure for this exam like the rest of them. Because Monoma knew Null. Because he had been saved by Null. Because Null told Momoma he could be a hero and even let him in on his secret by allowing the boy to touch his skin. Monoma Nito knows that Null is quirkless and has kept that secret since they were he had entrusted the blonde with his quirk status in order to save him from himself. After being beaten up almost daily in junior high, treated as nothing but villain trash because of his quirk, Monoma ended up being saved in an alley by Null when said vigilante decided to kick his abuser's butts. Apparently the boy was picking up some late-night groceries for his mother and they had found him, cornered him, and destroyed him. Just so happened Null had an early patrol so he could hand over needed information to Detective Naomesa and just stepped in. Monoma was like him. Wanted to disappear and die just because assholes, since he was a kid, called him a villain. His family was kind, hell, they had similar quirks themselves. But Monoma was the only one to suffer such horrible discrimination, seeing as how he was quirkless for most of the time. So when talking the boy down from his self-deprecating thoughts, Null told him he could be a hero and all the reasons why his quirk is so interesting and cool. That he could be one of the greatest since he could team up with so many different heroes. And even if he didn't want to team up with other pros, because Monoma would be one himself no doubt, in the future there had to be a way to categorize and keep DNA so he could use others' quirks, later on, without them needing to be there next to him. The hope slowly came back in his eyes that day, especially after Null offered his hand and told him to, "Please keep this a secret, I'm trusting you, Nido." "It's fine, Monoma. Me and him are very close." Hitoshi snorted, "You could say that again. Being quirkless doesn't mean useless. Doesn't mean weak. Doesn't mean stupid. And certainly doesn't mean I'm a liability." Izuku glared at all the hero hopefuls. This is something Monoma knows about greatly. "True. But..." "No buts, Miss Kendo." Izuku waves her off, "And I know this personally. I know someone who is pretty proficient in the hero business even if he doesn't want to be a hero. Despises most of them because they are just in it for the money." "Who?" could have finally managed out in the barest of whispers. "Well," he began before Monoma slapped his hand down. "You can't." "I can though." Izuku put his hand in his bag, running his fingers over his mask and voice changer. He was shaking. He couldn't show that though. He had already started to lose them when his status was revealed. He can't show his nerves now. "I am going to reveal something that is very important to me. Something that is very, very important to me. I would appreciate it if those who don't want to be on my team leave now, because I swear to you if you join Bakugo's side after receiving the rest of this information I will go after you first." His deep green eyes scan the room. "I won't put you down because you decide to leave, but I will gun you down first during the exam, making sure you don't get a good grade. Because you leaving here with this information means you are dangerous and I can't have any loose ends. Sure, Bakugo won't believe you at all, but I can't take any chances." He cleared his throat again before tapping his hand on one notebook. "And also, don't forget about all the information I have of you. You never know if one small detail can ruin you or your career. Not saying I would, that is blackmail, but that thought will always be in the back of your mind, making you worried for the rest of your days." When no one moved, he took time to breathe. He glanced at Hitoshi, who was giving him a nervous but loving smile, nodding for him to go on if he must do this. May was even giving me her full attention even if she knew what he was going to say. He was grateful for that. Null is quirkless. Know him because his infamous person was recorded last year due to circumstances. While the media hadn't gone into them much because they didn't have any actual information about them and there were much larger things to write about, they had been in some places on the internet. Especially forums. He muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm also sure that agencies that you interned for or did work studies at maybe mentioned who they were even if it was in a negative light." Izuku waited until he saw some acknowledgement in their eyes before he continued, "And I know that because," his shaky hand pulled out his mask, "I said we were very close and that's because we are one of the same." His mask lit up neon green in places. He had always been proud of his mask since the day he built it. Sure, it has changed significantly throughout the years, but the current one is so comfortable to wear. A perpetual smile was almost always featured on the front, but, depending on the mood he was in, well, it would change. Anger, sorrow, those often showed. But as a vigilante, he was almost always happy as he had never had the freedom as he does now. And being able to fly through the air, between buildings, with the capture weapons he made, and was able to use thanks to Eraserhead's training, he was almost always in a good mood. And while he didn't have his goggles, that mimicked his own eye movement as well as gave him infrared sight and connected with the AI that May helped him complete in their first year, he was sure the kids in front of him would know who he was. And when he says his best friend helped him, it was all because he was missing one code, meaning that even Nezu shouldn't have been able to pin on her. Said AI connected to his database so every fight could be recorded either to analyze something later or to show proof that the other attacked first. And so as he sits on the table, voice changer and mask officially secured, he looks at the rest of the ones his age. "Hello. Sorry I didn't introduce myself properly the first time. My name is Midoriya Izuku. I am from Class 2D, and since I was 11 I've been the informant/vigilante known as Null. And well, I'm quirkless. Always have been. But I am not a liability. I am not weak. I am not useless. I am strong, I am worth something to people, and I am horrendously smart." He makes sure to look at Monoma, who... Izuku can't tell if he's in shock or if he wants to cry. Maybe both. As the room got insanely loud, Izuku winced, pulling off the mask and placing it to the side as the students around him start to scream questions at him. Some look worried and scared. He was technically a criminal, but most would assume he was a villain, as that's what the news had tried to portray him as. And they are hero hopeful, so that would make sense. Before you run out of here to go tattle to a teacher, let me just say that the reason I'm here, before you all, he began, the reason I was chosen to be the leader of the villain team is because Nezu finally caught me. He's using it as leverage for me to play his FING game. Hold up. Kaminari seemed to have a headache after he accidentally discharged some volts from the shock. No pun intended. Luckily no one got hurt. You are a vigilante, but not just a vigilante. You, a kid our age, you are the one who saved Ingenium from Stain, which is why I wasn't at the sports festival? He raised an eyebrow, wondering if that's where the blonde had been going. Or are you talking about how I saved your stupid classmate that tried to go kill the man by himself with no reinforcements? This can't be real. Kendo mumbled as the rest of 2B seemed to feel the exact same. Looking up at him and then to the mask and then back again. It very much is, and believe me when I say I never wanted to release this information out, especially to this many people, but it seems I have no choice. As this is a war and sacrifices must be made to win. My sacrifice is telling a bunch of hero brats that I'm technically a vigilante so that they don't think I'm useless, and instead, I hoped, I would be able to prove that I'm competent and confident enough to destroy this exam. Tsuburaba seemed conflicted, as if he was confused by something for a moment, before finally finding his will to speak. What do you mean by technically? Because if you really are Null, then you are a vigilante. A very infamous one that has even made headlines. Because I'm quirkless. Izuku pointed to himself. The law states a vigilante is someone who uses their quirk to do something heroic instead of letting heroes and police do their jobs. As I do not have a quirk, I am technically not a vigilante. But since the cops and heroes have never caught me, they don't know that and assume I have one. Midoriya sighs, looking over at Toshi, who is giving him all his confidence in the world right then to continue. Same with being a villain. A villain is someone who uses their quirk to do acts of violence that causes harm, or to use a quirk to do illegal activities. And so since I do not have a quirk, I am not a villain either. And while I do run by the sentiment of, get attacked first, so I have self-defense on my side, I could still be considered a criminal. You know, because I associate with those in the underground? And sure, someone can blow a place up without a quirk and be called a terrorist, but I can guarantee you I have never done such a thing. There was silence again. It was so weird to not hear a peep out of hero students. Why? Why are you being forced to do this exam? Nezu found you out, correct, but why? He's a hero, so shouldn't he have turned you into the police? Yayarosa started. The laws you stated are correct, and it's possible that you could get off if you use your knowledge and wit correctly, but why? He took a few deep breaths, then 10 as he got himself ready. This might be a bit awkward, but do you think you can hold on to Mei for me, Shuji? He muttered, and while confused the boy moved to stand behind the support student before she could complain. And, could Awaze and Kaibara hold on to Hitoshi for me as well? Izuku winced at the skeptical look his boyfriend gave him as the two students followed his orders. Almost as if they had already made their decision that he was leader material after all. Why? Hitoshi asked him with his quirk laced in his voice, making Izuku just shake his head and glare at him to drop it. This was for both their safety and Nezu was his target. You asked me why I am being forced to do this, Yayarozu, and this morning I had a very interesting talk with that BSRD. He refused to stare into his partner's eyes, and okay, so the principal has been trying to get me as his personal student since last year. I have refused every time because I was happy. I was able to go to school like a normal kid and then go out at night to be Null. So I didn't want to be taught by him, no matter how flattered I was at being told how much of a genius I was by the smartest being in Japan. He didn't like that. Partially a lie, but he didn't need to tell these kids everything that was upsetting with what Nezu had been asking from him. They didn't need to know that there was a clear alternative reason as to why he was being asked consistently. Partially because Izuku hadn't been able to figure that one out himself. Izuku cleared his throat. He kept on trying and I kept on saying no and he saw me sneaking back into the school a few nights ago. And well, I've always been so good at hiding my tracks so well he never even knew but the BS dude was out and about at 3 in the FNG morning and saw me climbing into Hitoshi's room. He winced. I got slashed pretty bad by this one villain who wasn't happy about the information I gave him. Apparently he thought I gave villains and criminals vital information on pro heroes and bank robbery schemes and shit. And when he found out I didn't, he slashed my arm with these long claws and well, I defeated him, obviously, contacted Eraser to take the guy in and ran away before the man could try and convince me to go to his place so he could patch me up. Because Eraser always tries to patch me up because he's a good guy and cares, but anyway, that's not important. The tangent was definitely getting away from him and he could feel his freckled cheeks burn. So, Nezu saw me climbing into Toshi's room so he could help me with the wound. God, I got a scolding so bad that night. Izuku ran a hand down his face. So, yeah. Nezu saw me and told me that he wanted me as his student. And he knew I would say no again and, well, he said if I didn't do this exam it would be jail time for me, baby. He threw his head back with a groan, said that if I got an 80% of the exam then I am free to choose what I want in my life. To keep my absolute freedom, but if I don't then I'm his student and there is nothing I can do. Hitoshi and Mei were already seething in rage, trying to get out of the grasps that held them firm, and well, jail doesn't bother me much. I am technically a criminal even if I started doing all this to survive. I always expected that was in my future anyway, even if I poke all the loopholes, because the commission has been out for my head for years now. Izuku swings his feet back and forth as he sits on the desk, so when I mentioned that he, green eyes finally meet purple as he winces, not in these exact words, but, he said that if I didn't play this game with him he would implicate both Hitoshi and Mei. He would fabricate evidence or throw in the idea that they helped me. Even though I have always done this mostly alone, that demon Rat threatened to make it seem like they were in on my vigilante career. He didn't expect the stillness in the room. Not from his best friend and partner, and definitely not from the surrounding hero hopefuls. They looked horrified. All of them. That he can't. He's a hero. But he can. Izuku looked right at Mina. He's the smartest being in Japan and maybe the planet. He is sadistic and hates humans and doesn't like being told no. Dusty green met lavender eyes again. The sudden sorrow when being told Hitoshi was now a pawn in Nezu's game was quickly returning to downright fury. Let me go. No, Hitoshi, the snarl in his tone sounded toxic. If anyone will kill that if rat it is me. He threatened you and Mei. Said girl wasn't doing any better as she squirmed and kicked trying to get out of Shuji's grip. The only reason he didn't use Shudo as leverage is because his father is the current #1 hero. And I guarantee you that that would not have ended well for anyone. God, seeing Mei's tears, the ones she never sheds, smear the soot resting on her cheeks was terrible. She only gets like this when she is extremely set off but feels so helpless to do anything about it. Honestly, Izuku doesn't blame her. So, the vigilante scans the room. Now that you're in on my secret, on everything including the war that you are sadly a part of now, would you care to join me as I destroy the pride of a rat? He tilts his head to the side as innocently as possible, because I guarantee you I won't just make it to an 80% completion rate. I plan on making it to FNG 100 and then more. I plan on destroying his pride before I connect with some of my contacts to F him up psychologically. He started this, but like hell do I plan to roll over like a kicked puppy. The doubt that they had been swimming in the moment they found out some random general education student was a major part in their exam had been replaced with something greater. Complete and utter ruthlessness. Nezu truly doesn't know what he started. Izuku felt drained as he laid down on the old couch that they had managed to smuggle into the shed. It didn't take much longer after his pitch for the rest of his villain team to finish asking random questions about his illustrious career as a vigilante before it started to get too late. However, none of the questions really dug too deep into his past and ended up being more about himself since no one really knew him. Favorite color? Purple. Favorite animal? Partial to cats, but anything small and furry is normally a go-to. How did you ask Hitoshi out? I didn't. He asked me out but I didn't realize it was a date until he kissed me afterwards and I blue-screened like an old but computer. And when he thought he messed up and was pulling away I grabbed him, pulled him towards me, and kissed him again and then boom, here we are. He whined, turning over on the couch to look at his partner who had been stroking his hand through Izuku's curly hair lazily. As always, Toshi brought calm into his world no matter how crazy it gets. Why did I tell them that story? Izuku cut himself off as he groaned, finally sitting up only to hide his face into Hitoshi's neck. He really didn't need to tell them about his dating history, he was just caught off guard and flustered. Izuku could tell Hitoshi tried to cut off his own laugh but failed as he choked on air, hiding his mouth with one hand. His partner's chest shook a bit as he tried to hold it in. You must have wanted them to know, at least subconsciously, how much a gay panicked dweeb you can also be. Hitoshi's hand continued to run through his green hair. Not just a supreme overlord genius you try to play when you are in the zone. He groaned into the boy's neck again, trying to stop a yawn from escaping himself as the tips of his ears continued to feel inflamed. It was finally silent once again. The two in their own world as they cuddled against one another, alone as none of his new team, or Mei's explosive personality and babies, could break the silence. It was nice, and with Hitoshi by his side his anger was allowed to dim. Or at least as much as it could, knowing that he was the reason his boyfriend was pulled in by Nezu as blackmail. You know, we should head back to the dorms before we get in trouble. Shinso hummed, giving a kiss to his temple. I know you're a villain leader now but staying out past curfew? He the air between his teeth. What an absolute monster. Even if he wanted to hold in a pathetic laugh he couldn't. So as he chuckled he moved into the hand that was petting him so nicely, the one that had been playing with his curls with every run-through. Am I a scary monster at least? Just the scariest. As spooky as a bunny. Those are devilish. I mean you are the one who has floppy bunny ears on your costume. It's like I knew before I knew how much you were into demon bunnies like me. He could feel his freckled cheeks flare up with color again as his partner pressed a soft kiss against his lips. Izuku needed this after a long and stressful day just filled with so much unbridled anger. To be able to lay down on a semi-comfy couch with his partner next to him, to make sure he's okay, it is everything he could ever want. Especially because he fears that even if he beats Nezu's game, destroying it with flying colors, he still might be separated from Hitoshi, from the rest of his friends as well. Old and new. Because while becoming Nezu's student, if he fails, means the rat will absolutely either destroy the evidence gathered or hide it and will never show it to the police, there is absolutely no guarantee that if he wins he will get the same treatment. 'Cause Nezu can't have a student, a successor, that is a criminal. Yet he sure as hell can rightfully turn him into the police, without implicating Toshi and Mei along with him, if Izuku is able to choose his own freedom. There is nothing stopping him. And so Izuku is going to take as much time as he can to hug, hold and kiss his partner for as long as humanly possible. Because he loves him, and while it's just a fear and a theory there is nothing stopping it from coming true. Hey, Toshi? He heard a hum of acknowledgement before continuing. Do you think I did a good job, with my pitch and all, today? Did you not see the look in their eyes before they left the shed? He nodded slowly as Hitoshi laughed. There was no way in hell any of them would go to the hero's side after all of that. Even with the information that could get them in good favor with Bakugo. Izuku bit his bottom lip as he thought, hands finding anything to fidget with before deciding that playing with Hitoshi's hair was the best thing he could handle. I'd even you? I won't be upset if you want to go to Bakugo's team. I love you a lot you know, but if you want to play against me you know I won't go easy on you. He tried his best to make it into a joke but it was just so hard to. Deep down he knew how badly he wanted to keep his partner at his side even if it was just for this exam. Shinso Hitoshi grounds him and would definitely make sure he didn't go too far, would keep him in reality if need be. I want to, he sighed, looking to the side. Something was said after you were gone and lunch, when Bakugo came back screaming about you. Now, Hitoshi never lets anything Bomb Boy says to him hit him deep enough that it hurts. So the fact that his ex-childhood friend said something to hurt Toshi made him want to stab something. Preferably a blonde a-hole with an explosion quirk. What did Bakugo say? He rubbed the back of his neck nervously. It wasn't, okay, so everyone was talking, right? Because this exam is so cut and dry and well, there were some who already said, of course I will be on the hero team. Who would want to be on the villain team? And both Shudo and Mr. Aizawa were still gone and Hitoshi's eyes looked so broken. He kinda mentioned that of course I would be on the villain team. His partner could see the instant rage in his eyes before he shook his head quickly. Not because of my quirk. Weirdly, the dean never said I was a villain or something because of it, but he kind of made it seem like it was because I was dating you, which he didn't know until today when he saw us together. It could honestly be taken the other way though, so. Toshi. And I worked so hard to get into the hero course. Like, what if me being on your team means that I am what I was always told I'd be? Izuku didn't take any time to pull his partner into a hug, making sure to keep him close enough to feel his own heartbeat in his chest. Can I tell you something, love? There was a nod in the crook of his neck and he let out a long deep breath. I do want you on my team, but not because you're villainous. If anything, it's because I want to show off your hero potential. He could just feel the ever-growing confusion at that statement by the way Hitoshi stiffened. Now believe me when I say that Bakugo would be so lucky to have you. You are perfect for stealth, great at tricking others, and you could absolutely ruin me with those dulcet tones of yours. But I don't think he would use you correctly. What do you mean? I mean that a-hole has always been about strength and limelight. And while I believe the stories about how he has changed, to me he's still the same. I don't believe he respects underground and twilight heroes as much as he should. And with you? I don't think he would show off your true potential. He would focus on strengthening you up instead of allowing you to stay swift and dexterous. There was a pause in his speech so he could caress his boyfriend's cheek with one hand. I'm not saying you have to stay with me. I'll be proud of you, and will always love you so and much, no matter what. Even if you decide to join the losing team. Hitoshi's laugh was music to his ears, but I am saying I would make sure you stand out the way you want to be seen, a fantastic underground hero with the abilities of a pro and a vigilante given to you out of the kindness of our hearts. You really think I'm that good? And who knows, maybe my plan will allow you to show off those vigilante skills quite efficiently. Izuku shrugs with such indifference it causes his partner to snort. If you join me you will find out more of the plan tomorrow with everyone else. The vigilante presses a soft kiss to his lips. But if you plan to join Bomb Boy, I do have to warn you that you are first on my list. Not only do you know everything about me but my moves too? It would be a shame if you used those on me. Nah, you don't need to worry about it. I convinced you? Honestly, it wouldn't have taken much for you to convince me to join the dark side. Hitoshi shrugged, giving Izuku another small peck. You could have complimented me and given me a pudding cup and I probably would have caved immediately. Well, good to know I can win you over so easily, then. What can I say other than I'm horribly love-sick? Midoriya, can you read what's on the board for me and tell me what is wrong with the sentence, please? Izuku could almost feel a vein pop on his forehead. This has been happening all FING day. Ever since Nezu revealed to the staff about him lying about his test scores, the heroes seemed to want to challenge whatever the rat had told them. Every time Izuku was called on, he tried to just sink in his chair and ignore them, as if they never asked him to answer a question in the first place, before finally giving in under the harsh stares from his surrounding classmates. Ectoplasm had been the worst so far, making him go up in front of everyone of Class 2D to answer the math equation on the board. He had never been called in class to do that before, mainly because he kept himself as unsuspecting as he could. But now he was being looked at. A lot. It was so FING aggravating. So Izuku had a choice to make: go to the front and look like an idiot quirkless kid that the rest of his classmates could give less than 2 sheets about, or actually try. And honestly, even if he did fake not knowing how to solve it, he was sure the hero would call him out on his bullshit. It wasn't as if the math problem was even that hard in the first place. And so in less than a minute he solved it and headed back to his seat in complete and utter silence while refusing to look at any of his classmates, all of whom were just staring at him. Because apparently the problem he had solved wasn't even in the curriculum they were currently on, and well, Izuku had been so focused in writing in his notebook before he went up to the board, so inside of his own head as he made plans as the villain leader, that it hadn't even occurred to him that the hero had set him effing up. And so as he now looks at one of his favorite heroes, present Mike getting an easy pass in his book as the man is married to Eraserhead, he can't help but glare. It says, Sakura wanted to go to the store this very night, but it was not in the cards for her. The way I read it was the way it was written because you forgot punctuation, making the sentence seem rushed. Izuku spoke in perfect English, not even looking up at the board anymore as he tapped his pencil against the current page opened in his notebook. It would have sounded better if it were to have been written with punctuation, making the end result sounding more like, Sakura wanted to go to the store this very night, but it was not in the cards for her. He didn't appreciate the rather betrayed look his teacher sent his way, 'cause he really did like present Mike and would have to technically put him in the father figure category just by association with Eraser alone. But he did what he had to do to protect himself. That just happened to be dumbing himself down. It had worked for a while until Principal Nezu decided to step into his life and change it for his own pleasure. The look on the vigilante's face must have shown something other than annoyance, because next thing he knew Mike was almost giving him a look of pity. Or maybe it was because the classmates around him, again, looked at him stunned or like he wasn't the person they thought he was. A worthless, insignificant, average student who happened to be quirkless and was just scraping by. Yui, to its credit, handled discrimination better than his previous years of in-person schooling. Though he can't say much from junior high, as he only went for 1 year before switching to online classes, but the year he did go Aldra did jack shit to help him. Blamed him for his beatings and his desk being vandalized. Accused him for the red spider lilies on his desk or his bullies throwing him into a wall creating a hole. And it was all for the sake of the Aldra school district. So yes, it isn't saying much that Yui is at least not letting that happen to him, but it was the bare minimum he could ask for. Though part of him wondered if the only reason his classmates never did anything to him wasn't because of the discrimination policy, but because he had chosen to stay under the radar. To not be seen as anything special because being quirkless was already bad enough as it was. If he was better than any of the quirked kids, then maybe he would be a target again, because nobody that is quirkless can be or do anything anyways. It had gone through his head multiple times that dumbing himself down could have been his way to hide from his own classmates forever and not to just keep his vigilante persona secret at the same time. But that wasn't what he wanted to think about as he rushed out of the room when the bell rang. He didn't want to have to look at his classmates, otherwise Izuku knew he would analyze every facial expression, every twitch, and he just really didn't want to know what they looked like. Maybe they thought it was all a fluke and that he wasn't actually smart. That maybe it was just a good day for him. Pure luck, which was clearly rare for a worthless quirkless kid. Izuku held his notebook to his chest as he made his way to the support wing of the school. He planned to gather the help from Class 2H for this exam, and he really only had the rest of today to do so. Though considering May is in their class, his best friend probably filled them all in on what he was going to ask them during lunch. Because while the support classes were not as big as the rest of the school, mostly consisting of 5 to 12 students per class normally, the labs were almost always filled with students working on projects instead of eating, much to Power Loader's dismay. May didn't have many classmates her first year, especially those who could actually keep up with her crazy, but there were enough now that simply were just used to a progress, as Mayhem likes to say. And they definitely were crazy enough themselves to want extra credit to work with him during this hero exam. Before he could actually get to them, his Viridian eyes caught sight of someone he really wanted to talk to. It was a shame she was walking next to Ida, as Shudo had conveyed to him the night before that the boy seemed to find it wrong that a quirkless student from general education was doing a hero exam because it was too dangerous and Izuku could get in the way. How it wasn't fair that the villain team was obviously going to lose to them because of his status. Izuku really wanted to talk to Uraraka alone. And boy did Midoriya think the speed hero hopeful probably wouldn't leave them to have a discussion in private. But he had to try. Miss Uraraka? Can I talk to you really quick? The vigilante did find some joy in how he was able to sneak up on the two hero hopefuls enough to cause Ida to jump. I promise it will be really quick. The pink-cheeked brunette blinked at him a few times before giving him a kind smile. As you are the villain team leader, I do not find it appropriate to talk to members of the hero team. Ida spouted absolute bullshit. Did he really think it was against the rules for both sides to talk to each other for 3 whole weeks? Because Izuku doubts that Ida actually thought too hard on why it was actually a bad idea to have the bad ones talking to the good ones. For sure he did not think that Izuku could, and would, use psychological warfare to win. Spreading seeds of doubt throughout their whole team would be so dim and easy, but that wasn't what he was doing here. Honestly, I was hoping to talk to you myself to see if there was any way for you to step down as villain leader, as I don't think it's very safe for you to do this exam with us. Especially after what Bakugo has told us. Izuku made sure to make his eyes look as big and innocent as possible while giving his mouth a nervous twitch to it. I didn't choose to do this Ida, and I just wanted to, from what Shiroti told me he said that she hadn't officially signed you up yet, and so I hoped. God, did he look like he was about to cry or something, because the glance that Uraraka gave him was one filled with so much pity. She hasn't? Ida narrowed his eyes, glancing down at his friend who just squirmed, but I thought It's fine, Tenya. She pouted. I can talk to who I want, and Midoriya seems so sweet. Izuku had to resist sking some air in through his teeth. I'll meet you in the cafeteria, okay? And with a final look of disbelief given to the brunette, Uraraka pulled Izuku away hurriedly. He was thankful she took that initiative, because he could already tell that Ida would have put his all in not allowing them to leave together. In fact, the boy would have probably followed them to make sure nothing devious happened. When they finally came to a stop, he smiled at her. Thanks for doing that. And no problem. I'm sorry for him. Izuku made sure he still looked innocent and nervous. I honestly don't know why he was saying stuff like that. Swear he's better than that, and if you want to be a hero, then there shouldn't be a problem. Well, that was different. And unexpected. And way too late in his life to hear that. While it did catch him off guard enough to make the hair on the back of his neck stand up, he had done his best to cool his features. Because him? A hero? Sure, Eraser has been badgering him about it for years now, but he has been failed too many times to want to be one anymore. And who would want a quirkless person to save them? He was honestly fine with the way he was now. The identity that he had now. I don't want to be a hero. Oh. Then why? Nezu decided to have fun by using my life as collateral. Izuku rolled his eyes, and so I'm now playing a game with him that just so happened to be your exam. I was hoping that I could convince you to join my team. I mean, I know Shudo told me that you hadn't signed up officially yet, so I guess I was hoping Why would you want me? I mean, other than the fact that you are a very capable fighter and are strong, I also really want to fix your quirk. That seemed to confuse her, but he continued, quirks are super interesting, and the way they work is a phenomenon that still hasn't been completely understood. Why they began to happen, why they evolve, how they evolve. Will quirks one day evolve to the point where they destroy the human race entirely? Izuku hums to himself, and one of the main issues with quirks is that when they first get diagnosed at a young age, they could be diagnosed wrong. While young adults and teenagers can get reassessed, most of the time they don't, because the person thinks they know all they can about their own quirk at that point. So why would they want to destroy what they have just to rebuild and become, maybe, stronger? She looked so confused as the informant kept on talking, which was a proper response to any time he continued to ramble. It was a problem that he would never be able to stop, apparently. If you were to join my team, I'd be able to help you before the exam on how to, make your quirk stronger, because I believe you are using it wrong. Of course, Uraraka brows furrowed, confused. Using it wrong? Izuku nodded eagerly. And I don't want to accidentally tell you why I think your quirk was misdiagnosed or how you can expand on what you can do, because, while you are super cool and amazing, you aren't on my team, so. For her credit, the look of confusion she gave him did turn to regret as she squirmed in place. Oh, she really had already signed up for the hero team. Must have been early that morning. I'm sorry, Midoriya. I was really conflicted, and I was going to go with Todoroki because he is so strong, and he was adamant that being on the villain team meant winning. With a sigh, she rubbed her arm. But Tenya? Her pink cheeks got the tiniest bit brighter. And so you kind of guilt trip isn't the right word. Convinced? Peer pressured? Kind of? They basically were upset that I hadn't signed up with them immediately yesterday. Nezu was kind of freaked out on how you got a note to her without her knowing. She was also worried that if she went to your team she might have to leave my side to do so. Toshi gave those out for me since I'm not around any of you enough to do it myself. Izuku knew it was a gamble sending those notes to people without them knowing, but he was sure if he were to have done it himself, they wouldn't have been read at all. Specifically when they found out that he was quirkless. So at least with them being seen at all was a win in his book. Maybe that move had thrown some seeds of doubt swirling around some of the hero team's brains. Anyway, they mentioned how I could prove myself as a true hero and how I could never be a villain. Inaccurate from Izuku's own calculations considering her family is still heavily in debt and in need of money. It would be very easy for Uraraka to become a villain if she wanted to for the money, not that Izuku would say that out loud. And they heavily implied that being on the villain team was a losing battle. That if I wanted to prove myself I could go against Todoroki since he kind of proclaimed he was going to be on the villain team when he was asked after Bakugo's meeting yesterday. Honestly it kind of SCKD. Mainly because he really wanted to get hands on her quirk but also because she would have been a fantastic asset for his side of things. But losing one hero hopeful for the heroic side of things wasn't that frustrating. Because he knew it was going to happen, that he was going to have a smaller team and would need to fight hard in order to win the war. I am really sorry Midoriya, you seem interesting and nice and I would like to talk to you more after this, for sure. He just nodded in return. I understand, Uraraka. I still do want to help you with your quirk but it will have to wait until after the exam, that is if you want to talk to me again when we aren't on opposing sides. And if I'm not in Tartarus by the end of the whole thing. With an excited hop to her step and a smile, the brunette said her goodbyes and dashed towards the lunchroom. And while that all he now had more important things to do before lunch was over, continuing his walk to the support labs with his notebook, his peace offering in hand. Welcome everyone officially to the villain team. Izuku stood in front of the 18 members surrounding him. If he was going to be honest with himself, the green-haired boy made it out lucky. In his research of previous hero versus villain exams, while the teams were wildly biased in the hero's favor, he might have just gotten away with having the most villain members in recorded history. That isn't including the support students he got to sign up to help them create whatever they needed for extra credit. Though Izuku also offered them support. Gear suggestions that he normally only reserves just for Mei, as they are partners in crime. Said girl said it was alright as long as he still saved the best stuff for her. Which, of course, he agreed to. So he had another 7 support students helping him out for this exam. Then there were the business and management courses who he wasn't able to meet yet because he had gotten distracted by Uraraka on his way to the support studios. It's not her fault that his own planning fell through, but he needed to try and get her on his side. It was a shame that she, and the other members he ideally wanted on the dark side, had made their choices pretty much the first day. But that was expected, so he couldn't be that upset about it. And so all he can do is gather a teacher to head to the management dorms right after the meeting in the shed. That way he can officially get his plans for the exam up and running with a whole but operation. With 25 hero and support students, with an unknown number of business kids if any at all following his command, he would have already destroyed some of Nezu's expectations. Which all things considered isn't exactly good but was required in order to win. With his back turned to his team, he started to write on a whiteboard, "Thank you for all coming today. I know that we have our written exams this coming Monday, so you all must be stressed, but this is important." Izuku put down his marker and sighed, and I know for a fact that Bakugo is with his own group right now and is probably complaining about how many people didn't go to his team. Thanks for choosing me, by the way, and not picking two instead. I don't know, call the police. Dude, why would we do that? Kaminari tilted his head with a smile ear to ear, after everything you told us yesterday dash. Which was basically nothing, might I add. Izuku raised an eyebrow because really they never learned why he became Null, just that he was Null. Nezu has done an injustice to you, Midoriya. Tokoyami muttered as Dark Shadow finally took the time to fly towards him with interest. Without even hesitating, the vigilante put out his hand to slide the shadow bird's head. On one hand it was out of pure interest in Tokoyami's quirk, Because sentient quirks were so fing cool in every way, but on the other hand it just seemed like the right thing to do. And as the static tingled his skin, dark shadows smiling brightly as they moved into the calm touch, Izuku couldn't help but grin back. Injustice. Shudo muttered with angry frost escaping his mouth. It is completely illegal and laced with the corruption that rat says he is against. He's doing the same as the commission. The commission is corrupt? Sen mumbled. I mean, obviously. Mayhem replied even if she wasn't exactly paying attention. From what Izuku could see, the support student was busy tinkering away at one of the support ideas he threw her way. It was something to basically store Denki's electricity so that it wouldn't fry his brain. In fact, if his theory was correct, it would store it to a point that he could then throw said support item to create a massive electronic explosion. All of which wouldn't harm him. Though it was just a theory. No offense, but why is she even here? Aways pointed his thumb towards her, like I get you. You are a general education student, but Nezu chose you or, well, blackmailed you or whatever, boss. But isn't she from support? Honestly, I'm glad you brought that up. Because today we are going to be looking more closely at some of the rules that have the largest loopholes for me to exploit. Loopholes? Juzo raised his eyebrow, thumbing through the packet in front of him. The vigilante just nodded with a hum. In the history of this specific exam, the heroes have always won. The only team that made it through 30% of the objectives was none other than Eraserhead. Izuku pressed his marker to the board. He was able to get as many as he did because he also used the loopholes that are purposely written in. Without using them to his and our advantage, there will be no way for us to overwhelm the entire test and win. He pauses for a moment, writing down another thing on his board. They are there to be exploited and used, and while Bakugu has the same rules, I know for a fact that he hasn't been searching for these little issues. Because he doesn't technically need to. He has numbers over us, and while it will still be 19 versus 23, the closest split down in the history of this game, he will think that is enough to destroy a majority of us while the rest of them complete hero objectives for points. Izuku takes time to scan the entire group that was now actually reading through the rules without just skimming over them. He could almost say he was proud. One of the first statements in the rules says, this year's practical exam will be the hero versus villain prompt and will take place for 3 weeks for the second years. Notice how it didn't just say second-year hero students? While some would say it was implied that because it was a hero course exam, that it would only be them, but again, loopholes are a villain's best friend. Including mine, seeing as how I'm a vigilante but also not a vigilante. Izuku puts his pen in his mouth for a second before deciding to tap it on the paper. It's why me being the villain leader can't be considered cheating or against the rules. Because I was already eligible to compete or help either team since I am also a second year. The hums of acknowledgement made him happy. These weren't just loud hero hopefuls all the time. They could be smart when they wanted to. Even Ashido seemed to be taking this all very seriously as she bit at her thumb while reading. So Hatsum dash Yairozu started only to be cut off by a buzzer sound which came out of the support student's mouth. May. Call me May. Well, you can call me Momo as well. Her cheeks were slightly flushed. All of you. Actually, since we will be spending a lot of time together, and I know that my surname is a mouthful. Izuku nodded at that, noted. You can call me Izuku as well, and if anyone else has preferences we can either say them now or later. It is your choice, I don't judge. As I was saying, May is here because she is a second-year student and now part of your team. Correct. Izuku smiled. Not to mention I already signed up 7 other support students to help us out with some gear that will be needed. I'm also going to try and contact the business kids tonight right before curfew, so this all can't last that long, I'm afraid. They would be the hardest to get to join since he would need to prove himself to get them to be on his side. You are very smart, Izuku. Komori looked up at him while tapping away at the table. I wouldn't have thought about any of this. This nerd came up with like 15 plans yesterday before meeting you all. Hitoshi was staring at him with such love and affection in his eyes which contrasted with his teasing smirk. I wouldn't even be surprised if it has doubled. Shush, don't spread slander like that. It's only slander if it isn't true. How many plans have you made, Zuku? Todoroki stared at him with no change of expression, and yet he also ended up looking so innocent that it made him stumble back just a bit. It made his heart FNG melt. Now both of his partners, romantic and platonic, were double-teaming him. It wasn't fair. I don't know. Depends on the plan, I guess. Izuku squirmed where he stood, a slight blush tinting his ears pink. I made plans for team-ups that could work out in different scenarios as well as who would be best at taking out who and when and where. I then also made plans for psychological warfare against the principal and ways that I could F with him directly while in the middle of the exam. So if you don't count me trying to finish 3 cases for Detective Tsukachi and Eraser plus the analysis I have to get to that one villain, plus the plans I made that I need to hand over to Himiko, Dabi and Jiren. Though Jiren has a separate plan that I needed to make because of this exam and information on Ishiki Sakura to find out where exactly she disappeared to after escaping the lab shutdowns that Nezu was in. Plus I actually have to pick up a package from Jiren as well that I ordered a while ago, in exchange for information has finally arrived. Izuku furrows his brow while clearly rambling, partially mumbling, nonsensically. I think last night I was able to finalize about 25 with 10 more pending in my brain. Izuku tilted his head to the side, letting his fluffy curls flop. But that only includes my ideas for the exam itself. I do still have my informant and vigilante career for at least a bit longer after all. So I had to do a lot of work last night. The room was silent. Clearing his throat, Toshi broke whatever tension there was that, honestly, Izuku couldn't tell why anyone in the room seemed so stiff. When you told me you were going to sleep? God, Hitoshi looked disappointed. He hated that look, because you said you were going to bed. Like you have any right to talk, Mr. Insomniac. Izuku squints his eyes at his boyfriend. And when did you fall asleep, huh? 3 in the morning, and that was because you told me to get some sleep. I'm sorry to stop this lover's quarrel, but it was then that he saw some of the horrified expressions of the hero students. Oh no, what did he just ramble about again? His plans and his work as a vigilante where he... Did you just mention Dabi and Toga Himiko? The villains that attacked and tried to kill us last year? Last year when these Hero Corps students kept on having to fight for their lives. So it was fair for them to be suspicious of Izuku's ties, but again, he was technically a criminal and had already admitted to helping villains before with their quirks and some information, but considering those were 2 names from the League before it collapsed, that could seem pretty bad or traumatizing. Izuku tried to shrug as innocently as possible, though I guess you all would like some sort of explanation then? Some of them even seemed upset and all the vigilante could do was sigh and hold up both hands in surrender. The only ones who didn't seem to care were Hitoshi, Shudo and Mei, but they already knew everything so that wasn't a shock. And you're okay with that, Todoroki? Jiru pointed at the vigilante while the boy just sat there confused as to why everyone was suddenly mad. Dabi had been the one to steal Bakugu at the summer camp right in front of you. Said boy tilted his head to the side. Yes. And that is wrong. We already know Zu was connected to the underground though. And you know too since he spilled his vigilante secret yesterday. Hitoshi cut in. And if you want to hear more you can just ask him because after explaining it to us, like a year ago, everything made sense. It's kind of just what Null does. Takes people in, fixes or repairs them, then sends them back out to do better and be better. Faintly he heard Nito mutter, like he saved me. Dabi is my brother so, Shudo furrows his brow not realizing that was a complete bombshell to everyone else in the room. I would rather he be doing better than suffering and killing people. If he's telling the truth he hasn't killed someone in a year. And, Izuku cut in, he has saved more people than he has killed in that year, he pointed out and suddenly the loud room was just filled with murmurs. Wait Mina held up her hand, step back, repeat everything because I think something happened or was said and we just maybe we should talk because yesterday after your whole she gestures wildly with her hands in his entire direction. No revelation I think some of us were shocked but starstruck? Because you are a very well-known vigilante at this point and you mentioned doing criminal stuff but I think that some of you didn't actually think about it that deeply? Izuku finished her open-ended statement and she nodded. Look, I've had to do a lot to survive on my own. Have I ever killed anyone? No. Technically, have I ever completely been on the moral side of things? Absolutely not. I 100% bashed in or, well, I called some favors in to destroy Overhaul in jail. Because boy did that a-hole deserve to be tortured just like he hurt Eri. You know Eri? That voice was from Nezu. Izuku knew from stories with Shuto and Hitoshi that he was partial to Eri because she had never been scared of him, which was a rarity for kids, and what a fing shame because he is so nice and looks like he would just give the best hugs. I know most of you don't have the information. Okay, all of the ones in this room don't have the information on what Eri has been through, and I will not betray Eraser's trust and tell you all her trauma and what Overhaul had done to her, but I was the one who sent a ton of information to Night Eye. And when I say that I mean I've been trying to get her out of that hell hole for months but knew I couldn't do it myself. Izuku scratched the back of his head. In any report you ever saw from a pro hero, especially on a big case, there will be the word null somewhere in the paperwork but put in such a way where there would be absolutely no way I would get any credit for the help. Which is fine by the way. I don't want the credit. So, you just help? Most of the time, yeah. Izuku hopped up on the table, the whiteboard completely forgotten at this time, just like, I had to make money somehow when I was 11, 12 actually was when I was running really low on funds. And so the underground I went. Tried to give Limelight and Twilight heroes information on cases I stumbled by and or analysis on them or their sidekicks and well, of course they ignored it. I wasn't known yet. The underground heroes though? They listened to the information even if they didn't have a name or face to say thanks to. The name was just a blank space so they left it empty and well. Null stuck. Though it makes so much sense. No quirk, no worth, nothing, no good. That's me Null. So I kept it and that was the name I went with. You're not nothing Zu. Try telling that to everyone ever, growing up Toshi. You have mentioned being on your own to survive so you. Orphan. Izuku shrugged again. It's really not that important how that happened. Or even important right now because my life isn't what you want to learn. You want to understand why I work with two known villains that seemingly disappeared soon after the collapse of the League. He really didn't want to tell all of them his trauma yet, especially since it will most likely come up gradually during the exam anyway. His emotional control always affected how much he spoke about his trauma. But how did you get permission for the dorms? Nito asked, because the teachers came by every house to convince our parents to let us stay on campus. Oh, I had Himiko to help me with that. He hummed. There is this nice woman with green hair that works at a flower shop and she happened to donate her blood. So I swiped it and gave it to Himiko. Izuku, she is crazy though. She hurt my friends and was starving and neglected, Momo. He countered, look, I'm going to just be straight up with you because now we are getting into quirk theory and science talk and I didn't think this would happen for a few days because I want to work with all of you on your quirks, but here we are. He pointed right at her. You and Himiko are very effing similar. Hey Dash. Jiraiya tried to cut in immediately but Izuku only continued. How much do you or any of you know how a quirk works with a body? Do any of you have an idea as to how they have evolved into what they are today by changing the cells and blood with every iteration of an evolution? Because if you truly did your research, which you wouldn't have because the quirked never had to do this much research on this topic just to see if there was some sort of mistake with a quirkless diagnosis or having to look into more about those with quirks since they are the ones that can end up killing you with how dangerous they can be, you will find out a lot of interesting things. He jumped off the table, choosing to write in the one part of the board that was still completely blank. Mostly everyone who has a quirk has a weakness with said quirk, no matter how powerful it is. And there are some quirks that are deadly or mentally straining for the user. For a second he looked behind himself to see all eyes were on him. Well, I am going to use Himiko as an example because she is the topic right now and it is to show how you, Momo, compare to the little vampire. Izuku begins. Himiko's quirk allows her to transform into the person she drinks blood from. She is also able to now use the quirk of the person she turned into. It's a very powerful quirk that would have been amazing for underground hero work, for stealth missions, or even Limelight. 'Cause think about it, Toga drinking Hawk's blood and now boom, two Hawks on the scene. She may not be as powerful as him, I should know I tried this theory already with both of them in the same room, but having two flying heroes with feathers that you can telepathically move? She could have been amazing. Could is the key word there. Would anyone like to tell me why? Because she's nuts. Denki mumbled. Correct. Izuku agreed with the electricity quirk user, causing him to look at him stunned, before writing the phrase, quirk-induced psychosis. Her quirk legitimately made her nuts, crazy, insane. And that was because she was neglected, kept away from what her body truly needed to survive. This happened to be blood. He writes that under the phrase, her quirk legitimately makes her crave blood. And that is because her quirk, somehow, had evolved at some point in her family line that made it so there was something in everyone else's bloodstream that she did not have herself. So her body, as if in safe mode, would do anything it could to get her blood. Izuku sighed and looked back at them all. So unlike Stain, whose quirk made sure he was safe from all diseases for when he himself had to ingest blood, Himiko's quirk worked against her. As if it actually devolved, even if it seems like such a powerful quirk. Taking something away that made her insane unless she had it daily. It started when she was a kid and she was extremely anemic. Then as she grew she would have dizzy spells and feel physically weak, and her parents did nothing. But why? Kuji muttered. He loved the quiet ones. They were always the most curious. Villains aren't born, remember what I said yesterday? They are created. And blood quirks, especially when they involve other people bleeding, are considered evil. She was discriminated against by doctors, teachers, friends, her parents, for years, just letting her suffer. Eating rats and birds to satiate the hunger inside of her. But as she grew up, through all the neglect, she needed more than just the occasional bird and rat. And so, the vigilante waved his arms around in the air in their complete direction, quirk-induced psychosis. She was only in control of herself for about 30% of the time. Momo raised her hand. But what does that have to do with me? Because you are both similar. You have a quirk in which you need to ingest and digest food to use it. And while that doesn't seem like a bad thing, think about if you were born poor, Momo. Think about if you lived in a home where you could only have one meal a day. Izuku begins, not breaking eye contact. Even when you aren't using your quirk, it's eating away at your fat lipids. It's why when you wake up you probably feel a little dizzy because you are hungry. You are so used to the feeling that it never really hit you that it's similar to when you overuse your quirk. If you could only have a few things to eat a day, crackers and juice, because you couldn't afford it or you had neglectful parents, you could have been Toga. You might not eat human flesh, but think about not being in control of your body as it requires you to feed. You might eat things that don't actually satiate you nutritionally, like paper or stuffed toys. Because you need to eat anything even if it isn't food, and like hell, Momo, I'm sorry to say this to you, but you can still be like Himiko even today. What the F does that mean? While the voice was rough, Jair seemed to be more worried than anything as her hand covered Momo's clenched fist. It means that your parents are feeding you just enough for you to use your quirk just okay. Because they want you to still look demure and pretty. To look weak even if you are going to be a pro hero. I'm going to guess they have you on a 6,000 calorie diet when you're at home, with no fatty foods, and when you are at school you are too scared to go above 9,000 even after your training at the summer camp last year. Izuku didn't need the nod of her head to know the truth. You should be eating at least 15,000 calories a day to keep your quirk and you happy. And that is a minimum. Not only would your quirk be used, frankly, more proficiently, but it would also just be healthier for you in general. The vigilante stops to stare at her before letting out a long breath. I'm honestly surprised you haven't interned with Fat Gum yet. I would genuinely ask Kirishima for an in because that man could probably help you a lot, especially when it comes to what food would be best for you to ingest while at the same time would keep you healthy. With two hands put down on the table he bows his head. I know that Himiko hurt you all, but she really is doing better. It took a while of feeding her my blood, but now she can survive off blood packs that I steal from blood centers. Though I did create one of her support items that basically condenses blood into these small capsules that when it touches her saliva it explodes with enough needed to satiate her for a few days. He finally stares up at them. She really is the sweetest, and I know she would want to apologize to you now that she is of sane mind, but well, with being a vigilante now it's kinda better for her to stay under the radar. Especially since it's just her first year in this business. He didn't like seeing the way the blood drained out of Momo's face, but everything he said was true and thought out. He knew that for this exam he already had plans to get her on a new nutritional diet so that she could feel the change in her body for at least 3 weeks before being forced back onto her family plan, but now that it was all out there he was probably going to need to give her that sheet of paper before she left for the day. Told you when he talks about it, it just sounds so good. Hitoshi shrugs while making sure to take a frankly obnoxious sip of coffee. And Dabi? Does he suffer through the same quirk-induced psychosis thing? Shirhai tilted his head to the side. Nope. He was just another abused Todoroki kid that wants Endeavor dead. Izuku shrugs. I mean, it took a little time for Hawks and I to convince him to chill out a little? That maybe trying to kill Shudo to harm the current number 1 was counterproductive since he abused all his kids. Izuku nudged his head to the dual-colored boy before hissing. Sorry I didn't ask you before I started talking, Sho. No, it's fine. He just nodded. It's true though, he seems to be doing better. You know, instead of how I used to think he was dead. Basically, Dabi works with Himiko now under the occasional watch of me and Hawks to make sure that Flame Boy doesn't go back to his villain ways, with a promise from me that I will destroy Endeavor's career. And when I told him I was already on it because of Shudo, he decided that if anyone could do it, it would be Null. With another shrug he erases the half of the board that doesn't have anything to do with what he wanted to talk about that day. And before you ask me to trauma dump Shudo's business on you, all of the nitty-gritty stuff that makes me hate that fucker more than I already did, I'm sure he will do it himself once he gets more comfortable. Wow, working under you is like a whole nother level, boss. I swear my head hurts from thinking too much. Kusai muttered with 2 hands on his temples. And yet you just, basically did a whole lecture like you are a teacher, and I still was able to follow it. Izuku raised an eyebrow. This is the second time being called boss. Well, we need to call you something, and master sounds too kawaii. Mina yells with a smile. And sir sounds too rugged. Yusetsu added with a smirk. And no offense dude, but you're kinda short for what, a 14-year-old that skipped a few grades? So you don't seem like the rugged type. The snort that came out of Hitoshi's mouth, of which he tried to hide with his hand, didn't make him feel any less embarrassed. Izuku was average in height. He wasn't even that short anymore. Being 5'6" is a completely okay height no matter how much he gets teased by Hitoshi and Shudo's tall buttes. Plus, Kigo is 5'6" too. No one seems to notice because the a-hole just hovers all the time. I turned 17 in like a couple of weeks, thank you very much. He couldn't even sound like the teasing didn't affect him because it obviously did. And I don't care what you call me as long as you're not screaming and calling me Null in the middle of Yui. Yes, boss, was said by a few people collectively as he sighed. This discussion got away from him somewhere down the line and he needed to get back onto the topic at hand. Okay, so loopholes. He brings all conversations back around. We have many more to go through, but after this stressful talk about quirk science and morality, I only need to talk about one right now because it is important. Izuku turns the page of the rules but doesn't say anything at first as he bites down on his lower lip. So, there is another person that I want on our team that I would need to complete multiple objectives in one go, but I need to talk to see if it's okay with some people here first. The vigilante paused while making sure to look just a bit longer at Momo, Kyuka, Itsuka, Mina and Kinoko. It's okay, I don't want you to panic, and I will drop this plan at any time if it makes any of the women here uncomfortable even after I explain everything, but okay. Mina tilted her head with a teasing grin. What's wrong, boss man? Cat got your tongue? Nah, I haven't moved from my seat since I got here. Hitoshi murmured before taking another long sip of his coffee. Izuku tried to ignore his boyfriend as he continued, this idea is a little hard to swallow because even I don't want to deal with him. A hand runs down his face, especially since Shudo told me how he legitimately called me a liability and worthless because I was quirkless during Bakuga's team meeting yesterday. Like he mentioned before, the informant was a planner. It is how he has been able to survive for so long on his own. Not every plan needs 10 steps, not everyone needs more than one, but the long games were always the most fun. The most sadistic ones always seemed to hit just right no matter how wrong they ended up being. Izuku knew it wasn't good, and wasn't always healthy to like to see someone ruined, which was another reason he didn't want to be taught by the DMN rat. Because while Izuku still had some of his human morals intact, the Chimera had none as he was never human to begin with. He can pretend to like the kids he teaches, but in the end all that matters to him is if something is fun or not. In only a way that amuses him, which often leads to hurting others even if it wasn't on purpose. So as Izuku came up with possible openers to this exam, his heart soared with one idea. To ruin one person that has been a menace since the day he was allowed in school and into the hero course. So, how do you all feel about Mineta joining, in some capacity, the villain team? If he thought the horror on the young heroes' faces, when he mentioned Himiko and Dabi, was bad, then the way the blood completely drained out of them was terrifying. What the F dash? Mina slammed her hand on the table. A good reason not to be on the hero team was to be away from him. And Momo and Kyuka both said they tricked him to sign up for the hero team to escape him. Itsuka continued. Kinoko was only silent for a second before letting him see the absolute glare that was normally hidden behind her bangs. Why would we willingly want to work with Mineta? With a few deep breaths, something the other boys did as well as they scooted away from all of them, he continued, "Will you allow me to explain, and then we can throw this away and I'll start fresh." He tried to wait for all of them to simmer down, but all he got was cold-hearted stares. Something he really didn't like, as it reminded him of many of the adults in his life that hate him just for being him. Mineta is already signed up for the hero team, correct? They nodded, so he won't technically be on our side of the exam. Because him switching teams would be against the rules. Dark Shadow spoke cheerily, which honestly felt so nice considering the aura surrounding the entire room. Correct, Dark Shadow. Izuku cleared his throat, but I want to use him, because he is an idiot, and because he deserves being used. He began writing his plan out on the board. I asked Eraser yesterday about the objective, betray a teammate, and while that can be many things, I would never want to betray any of you because you will be family. He started, and that one conflicts with the other one that says, all villain team survives. And so I asked, because of a loophole, if someone believes they are on our team, either because they didn't read the rules or because they read fake ones, do they count as a teammate? He basically said yes. So what? Kendo starts with a raise of a brow. You want to betray Mineta? Not only that. Izuku shakes his head with a devious grin. I want to destroy and humiliate him after using him quite efficiently. I would love for him to steal the hero objectives for me because we need them, but he would also be of great use to us. He continues to write on the board. Betray a teammate is just one objective that could be finished right off the bat if we use him for it. And boy does he deserve it. The relaxed look of the girls in this room definitely made him feel better. Look, I don't want to use him, especially if it makes any of you uncomfortable. Especially you, Momo, he begins, because while he won't listen to me, not that it matters much because he would never be invited to any of our meetings or special training, but he would listen to you. He already thinks I'm worthless because I am quirkless, so if you were to say how, I meant to choose the hero side. I am so sorry, Mineta, but our leader is so weak I've taken control of everything. Do you want to join me? And then set him up to be our inside information gatherer for Bakuga's team, then well, it would make this a lot easier. Because believe me when I say that Bomb Boy would not know the difference between Mineta being gross and weird and Mineta being a bad spy. And then, he was starting to sound a little too excited. You all can get your revenge on him, seeing as how, if he could, he should have been expelled ages ago. This time Kaminari looked confused. From what he was told, the two used to be close at the beginning of the prior school year. Shudo theorized that Mina had a long talk with him that got him to step back from being the Grape's only friend. What do you mean by that? You don't all know? The confused look from both 2B and 2A was honestly sad. But only because it made Izuku feel bad about himself. Was he really the only one who did extensive background checks on everyone around him? Sure, he was an informant, but he did that before all his underground business. Mineta has an uncle and a cousin that works for the commission. Both of his parents are on the school board as well. And while Nezu has a lot of control, the amount to do mostly everything that he wants, having to deal with that many inside connections in high places of power gives the rat some trouble and can end up being tedious. Mineta legitimately cannot be expelled no matter how many times Eraser has tried. Because he has. That seemed to shock the students of 2A. The fact that none of them knew this was astounding. I have a binder full of every gross, insensitive and assault he has committed since his start at Yui. But I can't do anything with it because, well, I'm quirkless. And no one listens to a quirkless kid, especially one that shouldn't have been able to find said information in the first place. And it wasn't like I could just go find the closest adult and tell them, I'm null so all my evidence is legit. You have a binder? That whisper came from Jairu and he nodded with a smile. If you want I can give it to you so you can have it, you just need to tell a teacher. If not Eraserhead then Midnight. Because currently the man has just been going to the rat with no one to back up what he has seen. He looks at all of them, so yes. I do think Mineta deserves to feel betrayed and destroyed and he would make a very nice asset, as long as you all were comfortable with that. I mean, even May seemed to be scanning the room, trying to gauge everyone's facial expressions. This was a hard decision to make right at the beginning, but for him at least 6 of his plans needed Mineta being used by them. Plus he assumed that, probably, the girls here would like a little revenge. I'm okay with it. Momo was the first one to speak. Especially if you think it's for the best, Izuku. Nah. He raises his hand. If you don't feel comfortable, especially because you would need to be the fake leader to F with Mineta, then we won't do this. Do you think you can plant seeds of doubt in that grape fucker, Momo? Yeah, you know you don't have to do this. Jairu muttered. Boss has made it pretty clear that you have a voice in this. At least they understood that this wasn't a monarchy. Ever since Izuku was moved into this position, against his will, he wanted to make it feel more like a family rather than a dictatorship. Something he hasn't had in a very long time. Everyone has a voice and he isn't working alone this time. He is forced to be with and work with other people, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it has suddenly made Izuku feel more protective. Though that might just be because, as Null, he feels as if he has more experience. Statistically that would be accurate as he has been doing this since he was 12 and these hero hopefuls have only 1 year under their belt. Sure, it was one very hectic and dangerous year, but it was one nonetheless. I could do it. She finally responds, I could probably also create an incorrect rulebook to trick him. Excellent. You said you needed Mineta to take the hero's objectives. Nito waves his hand nonchalantly in the air. Why do you need those? To know what their tasks are? Izuku tilts his head confused. I mean, we are going to need them to do it ourselves after all. Please. Hitoshi raised his hand. I think you got lost in your own head because you haven't explained why we would need those objectives if we are villains. We can't do them or we get docked points. Oh, I didn't tell you? Any of you? Of course not, idiot. They all seem confused, which means you didn't tell them. It's because we are going to do those objectives as well. You have already said that, but we will fail if we do them. Shudo mutters. Instead of answering, Izuku excitedly ran across the room, pulling another whiteboard along with him. When I said we were going to get a complete 100% of the objectives and then some, I wasn't just saying that for sheets and giggles. And yet he was chuckling like a madman. It's because we are going to do some of the hero objectives as well. Because if you look at the rules, there is one that states, when a task gets completed it cannot be redone. This is by either team. Which means if the hero team does a villainous task, even by accident, it is scratched off. And while we wouldn't get the point, the hero team would be docked. Okay? And? Sun mumbled. So who in the world does heroic tasks but doesn't get credit for it? Meaning no docked points for villains, but the objective gets stolen from the other team. He wished so desperately that at least one person knew what he was thinking, where he was going with this. Because ever since he was in Nezu's office, when the DM in FNG Rat made one passing comment to try and get a rise out of him, Izuku came up with this idea. The one that made it into each and every one of his plans without fail. Because he plans to destroy the very concept of this exam and cause the heroes to scramble. OF-. Of course it was Toshi who figured it out first, and with a smile stretched across his face in excitement, "You are genius. I love you so much. No wonder you said I could use the skills you taught me if I joined you." It only took a few more seconds for Shudo and Mei to have the exact same reaction. Hell, Hatsum was practically buzzing in her seat as if she was just a glorified jackhammer. "Oh my god, Greenie. Can someone please fill me in because I'm a little lost?" Kusei furrowed his brow. The answer to this equation is simple. With a cheeky grin he turned around the board so it was facing the group. Only one word was written on it with big thick black letters. Vigilante. We are the villain team. But we will also be a team of vigilantes. Izuku couldn't drop his smile now even if he wanted to. Vigilantes are in the middle of everything. Heroes hate them and call them villains for getting in the way while doing their job for them. Villains hate them because they are apparently too much like heroes to associate with them. They do good by doing heroic things for absolutely no credit. Holy shit. And so what will happen if a vigilante steals a hero task in this exam? Because as per the rules when an objective is marked out it cannot be done again, so what happens if neither a villain or hero does it? The bubbling excitement in the room felt so much better than the stiff air that had been building up. The point becomes null and void. As soon as that left his mouth he bit his own tongue in disgust. No pun intended. Sure. I believe that. Hitoshi just laughed, and this time he couldn't tell if it was because of his excitement or because he just enjoyed teasing him. Right now Izuku really didn't care. It was going to be tough and hard to get all of them ready to be both villains and vigilantes, but it would be good in the long run. Because while they all might be okay doing tasks that hurt their morals and values, eventually it could start to take a toll on them. At least with a vigilante persona, as well, they could still hold those heroic hearts on their sleeves. Doing good for no reason at all but to help others. All he could hope for is that being able to steal heroic objectives could keep his team's minds open and clear rather than letting darkness cloud them. But more importantly, he can only hope that the team he will eventually call an actual family will have fun. And maybe, just maybe, Izuku won't feel too bad for corrupting them as long as they're all happy. 13 was smart. Giving any consideration, when knowing what kind of quirk they had, they needed to be intelligent or the lives of many could be at stake. It also helped that back when they were a child they were incredibly into even the thought of space. Mostly because of their quirk, but science was a clear subset in the subject which made their heart and body soar with excitement all the way back to when they were in primary school to the present. One had to be smart to know the ins and outs of space travel, after all. So how 13 ended up not a science teacher, but a business one, was incredibly confusing even for them. They were a rescue hero first and foremost, and yet the course they taught their kids was the one that always seemed to pull the hero's enthusiasm in to teach. If 13 thought about it even just a little, the clear reason as to why science wasn't their first choice was probably because they knew that they wouldn't be able to actually talk about said subject without all the excitement that was known to bubble up inside of them. A common occurrence whenever they fell deep into another rabbit hole about the subject. In the end, their words would become a bunch of rambles that didn't make sense to anyone who wasn't knowledgeable of the subject prior. Or just wasn't themselves. In conclusion, 13 had a brain. Maybe they weren't on the same level as Aizawa, and were absolutely in no way even close to Nezu, but they were smart. And yet this whole concept of the exam was confusing to them. Because they loved to teach the hero students how to save people and how to keep those around them safe as well. They never expected how some of those same kids would now be doing villainous tasks in order to hurt others. Sure, the staff didn't really know all of the objectives, only Nezu knows what is on the list. And despite Aizawa having taken the test before, he was told specifically to not take a look at them either, which everyone knows that if he did then Nezu would know and at least some of those objectives would change anyway. They honestly weren't shocked that their boss was acting stingy with every secret that Principal Nezu had, especially if Aizawa was right about everything. That the mammal was really only causing the second year's possible trauma for his own fun. And yet the idea of their students, the ones who have shown interest in being some of the best heroes that have ever been seen, choosing to join the bad team seemed so wrong and ridiculous. Who willingly chooses to be on that team? No one, right? And that isn't because the leader is the quirkless child who 13 hadn't the pleasure to meet before. It didn't make sense. So as 13 stumbled their way to the teacher's dorms, where their coworkers were sitting in the common room with some very concerned expressions, they couldn't help but have their interest be piqued, especially with the topic. See, you don't get it, it was perfect English. Why didn't he tell me? Same reason why he probably seemed annoyed that all of you were suddenly testing his smarts in front of his classmates. Aizawa's voice just oozes annoyance with every word he spoke. It was probably a safety blanket, and you all snatched that away the moment you got curious about how smart that kid actually was. You don't know that, Ishiyama added while placing a cup of tea down in front of himself. He could have just been slacking and not trying. Did you not see the same transcripts that I did? Aizawa responded with an obvious perturbed scoff. You have seen the statistics of the quirkless in his age range. The fact that he is still alive means we are lucky that he isn't just another added to the percentile of those who are trafficked, killed, or, the most accurate data, killed themselves. The man sighed, flipping another page in a packet of what 13 supposes is Midoriya's transcripts. That being said, why do you think he went to a barely legal online school after only 1 year of junior high? Aizawa didn't really wait for anyone to respond before continuing. His scores in elementary school and junior high were abysmal, with him getting more zeros on assignments and tests than I could ever imagine a FING 8-year-old could get. The man took another deep breath, and then one day his scores were just an average 70% and he suddenly stopped getting complete zeros. Though there does seem to be times where he also lowered his grades down and into the 60s. I could only imagine that those were very important tests, and he knew that his teachers would be stricter or more anal about why he might have done well. 13 stood there almost as if they were waiting for anyone to respond to the erasure hero, only to let the man take a long sip of his coffee before continuing. So then he leaves in-person schooling, goes online, and wow, look at that. Aizawa waves his hands in the air as nonchalantly as he possibly could. Better grades. Now that he is back at in-person schooling, do you really believe that he would expect anyone to be fair to him just because he managed to get into a prestigious school? I just wish he could have trusted me. They could practically see Yamada hanging off his husband just from his voice alone. He looked so betrayed when I called on him in class, and the rest of 2D were just staring at him like he was some sort of freak. Again, I don't know why you are so surprised. Aizawa sighs and runs a hand through his husband's hair. You did call him out, a child that before now was completely plain and average despite his quirk status, in front of his entire class that normally never gave him the time of day. If anything, you should have just tried to talk to the little menace after class. Ectoplasm groaned, rubbing both of his temples. I did the same thing as Mike today. How bad? He wasn't really paying attention, writing those scribbles in his notebook that he always has with him. The man said in a long breath of air through his teeth, so I thought I could catch him off guard by putting up a college-level math equation on the board to try and trick him, or well, to make an example as to why you should pay attention in class and dash. He solved it, didn't he? Aizawa looked up at him as the other hero just nodded. I don't think he even realized it wasn't something we were actually currently working on until afterwards, when his fellow classmates just looked at him shocked and confused. The man took a long sip of what 13 could only suspect was tea, and he kind of just slumped into himself. Midoriya is something, huh? And we just all missed it. The black-haired man shook his head slowly, almost as if he was disappointed in himself for not catching on to it first. Not all. The DMN rat noticed, but apparently he has been watching him for 1.5 years already. 13 finally decided to walk into the room that they would need to pass to get to the kitchen, and now he's the villain leader. A few of their coworkers said their hellos to them as they passed by, and while 13 nodded and waved back at them, they made sure to keep one ear open on the current conversation, because the topic of hero versus villains still didn't make too much sense to them. Speaking of, have the results of the team numbers come out yet? This time it was Sekijuru who spoke as he stumbled out of the kitchen, giving a subtle nod to 13 himself. I'm confident the hero team will pull through in the end, but at least some of my class seemed quieter than normal. And when I say my class, I mean Monoma. I can look it up, Aizawa mumbled to himself. though I for sure know that Todoroki and Shinso will be on that menace's team. As Shinso backed Todoroki up when he started to get berated by Ida about how unheroic being on the villain team was. So what? The little listener got a few good friends to help him out? He must be like you show. I mean, you had what, 6 people helping you out during the exam, and 2 of those were from general education. Is that the most that any villain team has had? Inui asked, because didn't you get the best score in UA history? From my knowledge, the largest villain team consisted of 11 people, but they had a falling out early on, turned on each other, and then they got caught by the heroes after said good team did 60% of their objectives. It only lasted a day. Shoyuda continued to mutter as he typed on his phone. They could only assume he was still looking up the current team count. And no, you don't have to get every point to pass the exam like I said before, just the more you do the better the outcome will be with showing your heroic potential. And no, being on the villain team and doing those objectives don't necessarily show your villain potential, just your dedication in passing the practical. Still seems like it's hard for the villains then. Sekijiro huffs while beginning to eat his food, and sorry to say but I don't think that kid could gather so many people up in such a short time. He's not close to many hero students. And trying to convince them that a Gen Ed quirkless kid is someone to follow? The blood hero says with his mouth full, causing Aizawa to glare at him and scrunch up his nose. FNG swallow before you begin to talk, you disgusting primate. There were a few collective groans from their surrounding co-workers. You didn't talk to this kid. He's smart and that goes over brawn any day. Sekijiro glares at him while swallowing his food. Tell that to apparently every hero team that kicked the villain teams, but including yours, Eraser. I'm sure this kid could only have Todoroki and Shinso, and supposedly Monoma, and still find ways to shock you. Even if he doesn't completely succeed, I'm sure this exam is going to be different. The blood quirk user scoffed as he leaned back in his chair. I'll believe it when I see it. Speaking of, you got those team numbers yet, Eraser? The man took a large swig of his water as his own calculated gaze didn't leave the Erasure hero. 'Cause I doubt this kid is going to even last a day even with those 3 at his side. For some reason no one had noticed the way Maijima just sat there, staring blankly at the table in front of him with his very large hands held into tight fists. As if he wanted to say something but he couldn't do it. Like there was a secret on his tongue but he had been cursed with silence. The support hero was never good at holding in gossip. He was one of the first to always speak to Yamada about new budding relationships he saw in the middle of the hallway, and yet it looked like it pained him to not spill whatever was floating around his skull. Interesting. Hold on. Aizawa made an almost dramatic eye roll as he finished doing whatever he does to get the information quicker than the rest of them could ever imagine. Sure, 13 has their theories, like how Aizawa having been Nezu's personal student gave him perks, allowing the possibility that he was able to use any of the principal's lessons to hack his way in, but nothing was officially confirmed. So, as it had updated a few hours ago, it says? And then he just stopped talking. Didn't say another word before he typed something more on his phone with his brows pinched together. And that look just didn't go away. Yo, Sho. Yamada waved his hand in front of his husband's face almost in a way to get the hero to come back to reality. You okay? What are the results? The man just continued to stare down at his phone in disbelief before looking back up at his co-workers' faces, then back again. 19 versus 23 with more pending for Midoriya's team. Midoriya has 18 students working under him directly. He couldn't even hide the shock in his own voice. Out of everyone, he seemed to be the most convinced that the Gen Ed student would shake up this exam, and with already 18 students planning to follow him on the villain side, that seemed to be the exact case. How did he even manage that though? Pending. Ecto raised couldn't hide his own surprise in his voice. Aizawa just nodded in response. What does that even mean? Whatever it meant just had to do with the way Maijima squirmed in his seat anxiously. As if he was frustrated with himself by not running when he had the chance. It means while those 18 will be specifically part of his team, he roped in a vague amount of other students to help him prepare. They get extra credit for their parts in the exam, of course. Aizawa mutters while still clearly shocked at the amount the kid managed to gather in just a day and a half. What did Midoriya Izuku say to them all to have them trust him enough to leave their heroic side thrown to the curb? Are you kidding me? Sekijuro ran one of his hands down his face. There are that many kids willing to fail? How many of them are mine? 1. You don't know if they will fail, Vlad. The under glared at the man. And 2. Only 8 of your students signed up for the kids' team. That seemed to make the blood hero significantly happier with the prospect that at least Aizawa will have more kids fail this exam than him. Not all of them have forgotten their training then. Everyone seemed to forget about the heated glare sent by Aizawa once they finally noticed the way Maijima was shifting, his hands shaking just enough to push a glass of juice off the table. Because of course he was being obvious, he always was. The man couldn't hold a secret a day in his life. While being a hero, sure. But as a teacher it seemed to be an impossible task for the man. Did that mean Midoriya was able to convince some of the support students to help? He may be the homeroom teacher for 1H, but he is still the only support hero currently at UI, so in turn that means he is the head of the entire department. Which means that the man oversees every support year's labs. Have something you want to spill, Majima? Inui smirked as much as he could with his dog-like muzzle. Do you happen to know the correct number that is pending right now? I can't. The support hero looked so pained. I should go. Now wait a minute, power loader dash. Mike leaned down to throw his arm around the short man's shoulder with a smile. Why not spill it? We are all friends here. The man legitimately sputtered as he tried to look anywhere other than Yamada's eyes. Please no, he whispered. Is there a reason why you can't say? Ectoplasm muttered with his arms folded over his chest. I made a deal with the devil. He whined, throwing his head back. I said I wouldn't say because he promised to chill out on giving Mei her ideas. I didn't even know it was him supplying her with some of her chaotic designs. Whoa. Yamada held out both of his hands. Back up. When? Honestly, I don't know why I didn't notice him, or I do now. It's because he is so good at not being seen, but Midoriya was always in the support rooms. Mama almost hissed. He and Mei are close, but I never thought anything of it. And he said as long as I don't say the number because he likes surprises, then I won't hear an explosion for at least 2 months when they come back after summer. I had to take it. Power loader grabs both of Mick's upper arms and shakes them while staring up and into his eyes. I had to take the deal. You're fine. Mike was clearly trying to hold in a laugh as he patted the man's back. Wire's safe here and away from the pink demon. Oh, F you. He raised both his arms into the air. Before any more gentle ribbing could happen, there was a knock at the front door. Which was only odd because another teacher would just come right in if needed. This could only mean it was a student who had shown up to the teacher dorms. Usually only bad things came from that. Kaminari blew a fuse in Class A's dorm, again, or Saramasu decided to start a game of Uno with the rest of the general education students and all hell broke loose. Someone got hurt or someone was about to be hurt by doing something stupid. It was almost always a pain, but they were teachers, and so it was their duty to help any student that came by, no matter how much of a nuisance it could be. What they hadn't expected, when Aizawa was the one to open the door, as he has the best glare out of all of them, so if it wasn't important the student would just go away, was to see the green-haired child who happened to be the topic that very night. Hair slightly disheveled and panting as if he ran all the way there from somewhere. Most likely from wherever he gathered all of his villain teammates. There was a black notebook held to his chest for dear life as he looked up at the erasure hero. The worst thing is that there was absolutely no fear when being glared at by the man. The same glare that still shocked 13 when they saw it. Hello, Mr. Aizawa. Is MX.13 here? It's very important I talk to them. The quirkless child tilted his head to the side with a small smile pulling at his lips. What surprised the rescue hero was the gender-neutral suffix. Most of their own class doesn't use it, choosing to just call them 13. Which is fine, it's what they prefer to be called after all. Why do you need them? Aizawa raised one eyebrow. You aren't in the business course from my knowledge. You are correct. Midoriya smiled brighter. But I only have about a few hours left before curfew ends and I'm not allowed to add anyone else to my side. And considering my meeting went a little long, I wasn't able to see them before complete sundown. Also, I just missed them entirely today, and it's very important to talk to them as well. I have a proposal that, frankly, they can't refuse. Aizawa can't even hide his own knowing smirk as he waves his arm to allow the kid through. The same child who practically tripped over their own big clunky red shoes, while crossing into the common room, seemed to have no care in the world, no worries. One look at Maidma showed the man looking pale as he caught a glimpse of the devil, but a side glance from Midoriya had the hero looking away. It was one single glance that said, "I haven't told anyone, just like I promised," without needing to say even a single thing out loud. Something Midoriya seemed to acknowledge before skipping his way to them. "I am sorry it's so late, but do you think you could follow me to class 2J? I kind of need a competent adult who can sign off and acknowledge that they agreed to work with me after I talked to them." Of course, Midoriya. 13 nods once to him before glancing at the other teachers. They too must have noticed that Midoriya seemed certain that the business course would side with him. Well, considering how the hero team, most likely, didn't look outside of the hero course probably meant he wouldn't have to throw in any counteroffers. Great. Thank you so much. He had the smile of an angel, but as someone who never had the glory of teaching this child, or talking to him before this moment, 13 couldn't tell if it was normal or not. Or real. Before they could leave the area completely, he stopped in place, looking right up at a corner of the room. "Hey Rat," Midoriya started, "don't even think of listening in. I love having others surprised, and considering that you don't, it makes me feel even more giddy to show you something completely unexpected and splendid." He held up a small object from his pocket, thumb hovering over a button. "Even if you were to try to do so remotely, I have my special little jammer on me. You know, the one May and I created? The one that you haven't been able to bypass yet." The boy just continued to stare at the empty corner. Izuku's seemingly fake innocent smile turned into a glare. "I hope you would submit to the fact that you should not cheat in the game that you have created. 'Cause what would the point be in that?" His thumb swiped over the button, large enough that it could seemingly be a scanner for his own thumbprint. "This would also mean you need to stop following me in school unless you want to seem pathetic instead of the winner you claim you will be." 13 couldn't even hear shuffling from the rest of the staff. As if they were stunned into silence. Understood young Midoriya. 13 could hear a grumble from the boy's throat that was almost a growl. Honestly, that would have surprised them more if it hadn't been for the spontaneous voice of Nezu coming from an intercom. "I'm sure you have many things planned." With a fake smile now drawn on the kid's face once again, they left the dorm quickly. 13 stayed silent as they started to hear the instant murmurs from their coworkers behind them. God, this was only going to stoke the fires even more of this mysterious green-haired quirkless teen. It didn't take them much longer to get to the 2J dorms. They had arrived in complete silence, but as soon as the door opened, laughter and the smell of food wafted into their direction. All of which was coming from the common room that was always covered with stats. Whatever tension had been there was destroyed almost instantly. Midoriya looked calm and at peace as he took in his surroundings. Almost every wall had a bulletin board or a whiteboard that had been requested to Cementos after the kids kept drawing on the walls, of which had hero rankings of Limelight and Twilight heroes. The business kids never really focused on the underground specifically because they wouldn't be able to market any of those heroes, so they decided there was no point in looking into them. There was always a bookshelf that was a mess with papers spread out everywhere because, no matter how much they cleaned, it would always end back up like this. And yet, 2J was significantly better at cleaning than 2I, who often had the exact same problem. So as the freckled teen walked in with 13 at his side, the rescue hero was sort of shocked to see some of 2I sitting around with their own homeroom. Then it hit them. The mid-year summer rankings were going to be announced that night, and so the business class was having a party. Of course they would have a get-together for that. It's all they really do. "Excuse me, we have a visitor." 13 cleared their throat. "I promise he won't take long and you can get back to your party. Just don't forget to head back to your own dorm by 10, or you can contact me and I'll make sure class 2I get back safely." A few of their students cooed in delight and well, it brought a smile to 13's face. They weren't the strictest teacher, they knew that, But the rest of the faculty didn't need to know themselves. Well, Kiyama would need to know, as she is the other second-year business course teacher, when not teaching art history, and often helped 13 corral the business course in general. But currently she was out doing hero work. She had been called in to do a mission and wouldn't be back until 1 o'clock in the morning at the latest, so maybe she wouldn't even need to know. Hello. Midoriya smiled at them all. Most of you don't know me, but I know all of you, and I would like some help on the upcoming hero exam. He walked over to them, notebook still clutched in his hand. I'm sure the business course has heard about the hero versus villain exam. Out of all the practicals the second-year hero students have gone through, this one is the most infamous. There were a few who nodded along, but others just scoffed in annoyance. As much as the business kids needed to like the hero students, as most want to head into a profession after they graduate that very much connects them together, they are the ones favored by the media. The best hero school in all of Japan is what most people think about when they hear the name Yui or see the uniform. But once the words general education, support, or business leaves a student's lungs, it seems like interest drops immediately and that they themselves don't matter anymore. Which is truly a DMN shame. I'm not a hero student. Midoriya starts. I'm from class 2D and am forced to be the villain leader for this exam. Forced? Is it really that bad? And I know you may be thinking it is a lost cause for my team to win, but I'm fairly certain I will change everything. And I need you all to help me with that. For everything to work swimmingly. What the F can we do? 13 didn't even have time to reprimand their student before she had continued. We aren't going to fight a bunch of hero kids. Wasn't expecting you to. He says calmly, I plan to use you all and your services, just the way you are. You all are great at creating merchandise and businesses that could be used during the exam. Every second-year class can be brought into this practical in the way they are best suited. Izuka doesn't stop looking into the student's eyes as he continues. You will not only get extra credit for helping with this exam, but you will also be able to use whatever you do here as references for the future. What would we even do? This notebook. Midoriya holds the book, the one he had been clutching the entire time, out in front of him, is not only the very idea of what I would like you to do for this exam, as you can even use your own creativity, but also a bribe. They all looked skeptically up at him before one of 13's eager kids grabbed it. This book is normally coded like all my other notebooks, but I decoded this one so you could take a look at it. It has some of my analysis on classes 2A and 2B. He swallows as he watches the expression of the student go blank as they read. But while it may not have everything I have on them, this does have my predictions on what our collective year's hero students' rankings will be from when they graduate and 5 years after that. Both business classes jumped up behind the boy who was diligently reading every single page of Midoriya's notebook. Of course, that would be of interest to their kids. They want to make a living out of this, so having a prediction as to what's to come would put them ahead of the game. But that was it though, just an idea, nothing concrete. All the while he just looked so DMN calm and confident. How do we know to trust this? This could just be some half-butted guesses. I mean, we do this for class and you're just some gen ed kid. With no care in the world, Midoriya then handed one of them a piece of paper. These are my predictions as to who the current top 10 heroes will be during this year's summer rankings, which should be starting soon. Izuku tilted his head as he looked up at the clock. The business kids scrambled to the television, making sure to turn it on to the highest quality channel they could possibly manage in order for them to watch the whole show. Throughout the event, the one who had Midoriya's list kept looking down at it before back up at the screen again and again and again. Face getting wider with every next correct answer. Endeavor was number 1, obviously, with Hawks a close second. Best Jeanist was still seated at 3rd with Mirko jumping up to 4th place. Edgeshot moved down to 5th with Kamui Woods nipping at his heels. Ryukyu moved up to 7th place, and then that's where everything 13's own students predicted differed from the one Eraser now calls a little menace and Power Loader called a devil. Where Wash used to sit comfortably at 8th, for all of his community service and kids loving him, Fat Gum had jumped up and had taken the spot. The man had been stuck in the 50s for so long, but, after the previous year, more people have been looking at that man differently. Maybe it's because of how powerful his sidekick, Sun Eater, is doing now that he became a pro. Or maybe it was just because people now ask for hugs from the man that he willingly gives. The community service that the hero has been doing, making sure that other people are able to eat as well as he is able to, and the charities he had been donating to certainly helped his new ranking as well. Then Gang Orca moved up to 9th and, well, Wash is barely keeping his spot in 10th place with Mount Lady coming up from behind. It seemed she was just a few hundred points off from taking the spot from the laundry hero. 13 never got as excited for the updated rankings as much as she should, being a business teacher and all, and yet for this one she was horribly SEN. Because every prediction from Midoriya was right. All the way down to how close the numbers actually were. I analyze, he shrugs, it's what I do, it's what I'm very good at. So when I say that notebook, while it may not be my complete work, has enough information to help you in the future, I mean it. And if you support me by helping me with the exam. By doing this, he paused his talking, taking the notebook back and sliding in several sheets of paper, then I promise to give you more in the future. With one look at the loose paper handed to their class, 13 could see the shift entirely. There was shock and confusion first, disbelief definitely in their eyes, but once they saw whatever was written on those sheets, all they could see was absolute pure excitement. Can we even do this? It's a loophole in the rules. So have fun. While I'm signing you up for my side, meaning anyone who joins to help will get extra credit, you can hire whoever you want. I won't be able to control them, but you are. I hope you would know what you are doing, especially if you follow at least the guidelines I gave you. With that, everything was sealed, much to 13's own shock. 13 business course students chose to sign up for whatever hell Midoriya was planning. A winning smile and a look in 13's direction just screamed, please don't tell everyone how many people joined me. Midoriya Izuku left, leaving Class 2J and 2I in a frantic and chaotic state as they cleared off 3 of their whiteboards in favor of whatever the devil had offered them. Stumbling back to the teacher's dorm themselves, 13 was welcomed with almost every staff member. They all had confusion written on their faces as to what took so long and why. With one look in Mijima's direction, they gave him a knowing smile. I can't tell,